All right. Good morning. The time is 9 o'clock. I call to order the June 16th, 2022 meeting of the Contractors State License Board. My name is Susan Granzella, and I am CSLB's board chair. If we could all please stand, I invite Diana Love to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Put your right hand over your heart and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. I will now note for the record that Mary Tykert, Rodney Kobos, and David Delatorre have approved absences today. Mariah, please confirm board member attendance and roll call.
Susan Granzella. Here. Frank Alt.
Here.
Here. Alan Guy.
Here.
Diana Love. Here. Michael Mark.
Here.
Steve.
Here.
Jim Ruane.
Here.
Johnny Simpson.
Here.
Mary Tykert, excused absence.
Thank you, Mariah. Also joining us is CSLB staff Registrar David Fote, Chief of Licensing Fode Garagozlo. We were practicing earlier. Garagozlo. Chief of Enforcement Steve Grove, Chief of Legislation Mike Jamnetsky, and Executive Office Analyst Mariah Rivera. David is joining us virtually due to health and safety protocols. He is here for board members to appear remotely. This off-site location must be publicly noticed 10 days from before the meeting. This requirement does not apply to staff such as David. Today from DCA, present is legal counsel Jason Hurtado, Ryan Marcourt, and regulatory counsel Danny Rogers, and they are in the audience. I want to take the opportunity to congratulate Michael Jamnetsky on his well-deserved promotion to Chief Deputy Registrar. Well done and welcome to the management staff. Thank you. So moving to agenda item B, which is for public comment and to request agenda items for future meetings. The board values public input as part of our consumer protection mission. To allow us enough time to conduct our full schedule of business today, I'm limiting public comments to 2 minutes apiece. If your comments don't involve an item on today's agenda, this would be a good time where you can make them. If you have comments on one of our agenda items, we encourage you to wait until we get to that item. We will give you an opportunity to make your comments at that time. We also ask that your public comment relate to the agenda item currently before the board. There are a few other rules that apply. First, California prohibits board members from discussing any matter brought up during public comment, and board members are not allowed to act on any item not on today's agenda. Second, if you want the board to discuss a topic not on the agenda, you can ask us to consider placing that issue on the agenda for a future meeting. Finally, if you have an application, complaint, or disciplinary charges pending before the board, we ask that you not discuss the details of your case or pending complaint. That's because the board members may be the judges and by law are not permitted to receive evidence or information that is not part of the administrative record in the case. So, do any board members have an item that they would like placed on a future agenda? All right, seeing none, I'm going to ask if there are any comments from the public, and that would be for items that could be placed, considered for a future agenda, or for items that are not on today's agenda. Any comments from the public?
Chair, before we move on, do you mind if I ask Mariah to establish that we have a quorum? And that is nine members?
Yes.
We have a quorum.
Oh, thank you. Alex Christian. Board Counsel Jason Hurtado recently informed CSLB of his appointment as legal counsel at the Department of Cannabis Control, and that today is his last CSLB board meeting. Jason, this board has benefited from your expert, wise, and conscientious representation of CSLB through a number of challenging issues over the past several years. I also know that board members and CSLB staff have particularly enjoyed working with you. We are sad to see you go, but we'd like to congratulate you on your new position. We have a certificate for you, and which I will now read. On behalf of the Contractors State License Board, members and staff, thank you for your outstanding work as board counsel. Your exemplary dedication, professionalism, and commitment have been an inspiration, and your diligent efforts have been greatly appreciated by the board. You will truly be missed by all who've had the privilege of working with you, and we wish you all the best in your future endeavors. And next, we would like to present this certificate. Could you please come up? I know. So we do this. Congratulations. She's ready.
Again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
You're welcome. Are there any board members who would like to comment as we acknowledge the efforts of Mr. Hurtado? Any comments from board members? Oh, it goes.
Good morning, everyone. I just want to say.
Okay.
Good morning again, and thank you, Jason, for your leadership and your work being at CSLB, and again, for everything that you have done in that role. And I wish you the best in going forward. Thank you.
Madam Chair, Jason, I do appreciate your straightforwardness in closed sessions. A lot of times when we're dealing with very complex topics, having that straightforward answer really helps speed things along, and I really appreciate that part about that. Sometimes it's best to just get straight to the business. Let's get this thing done, and you have always been very, very good at doing that, so thank you.
Go ahead.
It's Johnny. I would also like to thank you, echo Michael's remarks, man. It's been a pleasure to deal with you. You've always been straightforward, and you can tell us exactly what's on your mind. So thank you very much, and we appreciate everything you did for us. And congratulations and good luck.
Thank you, John.
Mr. Fote, I understand you have comments that you would like to share with us?
Yes, I do. I get more. But I really appreciate the opportunity to say a few words regarding our friend Jason. There's a lot that goes on behind the scenes at CSLB. On occasion, administrative law judge decisions are received and we're unable to adopt them. We don't agree with it. That requires Jason to draft a replacement decision. We have a lot of meetings with attorneys from other state agencies regarding jurisdictional questions, and Jason has routinely assisted us with the more complex licensing and enforcement issues. Jason excelled at providing sound legal advice and always in a professional manner. And I just really want to let everyone know, Jason, that we really appreciate all you did. We wish you well, and thank you.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you, Dave. Next, we would like to recognize CSLB Personnel Manager Ingrid Witowski-Sedler. During the past 3 years of transition in the workplace to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, CSLB Personnel Manager Ingrid Witowski-Sedler has worked tirelessly to ensure CSLB follows personnel best practices and staff continue to have a safe and productive work environment. Ingrid was vital in planning and executing new ways of doing business in the new telework environment. Ingrid worked closely with CSLB's executive management team in executing new telework agreements and revamping CSLB employee expectations and guidelines for staff. Ingrid and her staff put in extra work. That's sort of a mild description of all the work you must have put in complying with new COVID-19 reporting requirements and health and safety issues related to COVID-19. Ingrid also managed to ensure that all recruitment, onboarding of new employees, career development, training, and all other personnel-related issues kept moving forward. For this, we recognize Ingrid Witowski-Sedler for all her hard work and dedication to CSLB. Please, why don't you come up, and I would like to So for a moment, I would like to, in recognition of your vital work in planning and executing new ways of doing business, that's a way of putting it, in the new telework environment and your tireless effort to ensure CSLB follows best practices and ensure staff continues to work in a safe and productive work environment. Thank you. Thank you. And last but certainly not least, I would like to recognize CSLB Business Services Manager Alex Christian. Also, during the last 3 years of transition in the workplace to respond to COVID-19 pandemic, CSLB Administrative Manager Alex Christian has worked tirelessly to ensure that CSLB staff have the resources they need to perform their jobs safely, and the CSLB offices remained accessible to the public. Alex and his staff worked diligently to provide CSLB staff with necessary personal protective equipment, PPE, office supplies, and equipment to do their jobs safely. Alex also ensures that CSLB headquarters and all CSLB's field offices are properly cleaned and sanitized as COVID-19 cases are reported. Under Alex's supervision, mailroom services, electronic document conversion services, and cashiering services were uninterrupted as CSLB transitioned to the telework environment. For this, we recognize Alex Christian for all his hard work and dedication to CSLB. Would you kindly come up? So I will read again on the certificate. In recognition of your outstanding work to control COVID-19 exposures and reduce the spread of the virus within the workplace by ensuring that CSLB staff have the equipment and resources they need to perform their jobs safely and keeping CSLB offices accessible to the public. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's okay?
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any board members who would like to comment at this time?
I'll start again.
Go ahead.
I want to thank both Ingrid and Alex for simply just keeping us all safe. Thank you.
And is there any public comment for this agenda item for the recognition? Any public comment on this? Seeing none. Next, we move on to agenda item D, the review and possible approval of March 30th, 2022 board meeting minutes, which begin on page 9. Do any board members have edits to the minutes at this time?
I do, Madam Chair. On page 11, at the very bottom, where it talks about under DOJ, it should read, "A quorum was established by Vice Chair Mary Taggart and not Secretary."
Oh. Duly noted. Are there any additional comments from the board? Any changes, edits? Seeing none. I will ask for a motion to approve the March 30th, 2022 board minutes.
So moved.
As amended? Yeah. Second.
Goes off. No further comment? Is there any public comment? Seeing none. Mariah, please call roll.
Susan Granzella. Frank Altamura.
Aye.
Rodney Kobos. Approved absence. David De La Torre, approved absence. Miguel Galarza. Alan Guy.
Aye.
Diana Love.
Aye.
Michael Mark. Steve Pinelli. Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Teichert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you. We are now moving on to D2A and B, which is the Registrar's report, which includes an update on the tentative board meeting schedule, as well as an update on the National Association of Contractors Licensing Agencies, or NASCLA. At this point, Registrar David Fote, I turn the floor over to you.
Thank you, Chair Granzella. The next quarterly board meeting is scheduled in Johnny Simpson's hometown of San Diego. And the tentative date for that would be to start in the afternoon of Tuesday, August the 30th, and conclude in the morning of August 31st. This will be our annual joint meeting with the Nevada Board. I spoke with Margie Green. Margie's the executive officer for the Nevada Board. I spoke with Margie yesterday, and we talked about a few agenda items that I just wanted to share with all of you this morning. Agenda items include a discussion of new and emerging construction technologies, outreach opportunities, and successes that California and Nevada have had with enforcement strategies. But like for any board meeting, if you have any suggestions for topics, we would welcome them. We're going to have an opportunity to perhaps have a guest presenter or two at this meeting, because the board meeting in San Diego will coincide with the National Association of State Contractors Licensing Annual Conference. We refer to that as NASCLA. They're having their annual conference in San Diego the same week that we'll be having our board meeting. They're also going to have an investigator track that could be beneficial for our investigators. And I've talked to our enforcement chief, Steve Grove, about sending up to 15 investigators to that training. So we're excited about that. And agenda items include what we can do as regulatory bodies to protect consumers and also to raise industry performance by recruiting people into the construction industry. The idea being to help these folks consider a construction career and become competent professionals and future construction industry leaders. I was able to suggest two presenters. One is from the Alameda County DA's office to talk about some of our successful criminal investigation strategies. And also our Vice Chair, Mary Tyker. I mentioned that before. Mary will be talking about the success that we've had in encouraging women to consider a construction career, and also what we've done in some of the disadvantaged communities. So Mary will be a presenter on Thursday. That would be September 1st. And just to wrap this up, if there are any board members that are interested in attending the conference, please let me know. We can let a conference form for you and pay the conference fee. So that would be my update on the board meeting and also the NASCLA conference.
Thank you, Dave. Is there any comment from board members on the registrar's report? Is there any public comment at this time on the registrar's report? No. Seeing none. Thank you, David. We'll move on to the next item. That would be the budget update, which begins on page 57 of your board packet. I now invite Board Secretary Diana Love to introduce the budget update. Thank you, Diana and Stacy.
Good morning again, everyone. As board secretary, I serve as the board's budget liaison with staff in the monitoring and reporting of the budget to the board. The budget runs on a fiscal year calendar, which runs from July through June. Since the fiscal year is nearing an end, let me highlight the budget year-end projections. The CSLB authorized governor's budget is $75 million, plus an additional $5 million in mandatory external costs. At year-end, CSLB is projecting to spend $75 million in total expenditures and is projecting the final revenue at $80 million. This really highlights all of the hard work that has been done over the last 2 years in balancing the budget. The dedication and commitment by staff have really paid off. Job well done. Now let me turn it over to the budget manager, Stacy Paul, to provide a more detailed budget update. Thank you.
Thank you, Board Secretary Diana Love, and good morning, everyone. The budget update begins on page 59. The first chart shows the fiscal year 21-22 final budget and expenses through March. Nothing too exciting. In fact, we are spending slightly lower than expected at 69% of our budget authority, keeping us on track to spend our authorized budget by year end. The chart directly below shows our revenue through April. Overall, it shows us exceeding the prior year revenue by 9%. This increase reflects the new fees that took effect in January, which, if we compare to the same time last year, for the months of January through April, we have collected an additional $77 million in revenue based on the new fees. If you flip the page to page 60, this is our fund condition. This projects out to budget year 22-23. The middle column is current year. You can see we began this fiscal year with 1.9 in the reserves. Our projected revenue for this year is $80 million, and directly below that is our projected board expenses and external cost at $75 million this year. Bringing in more revenue will increase our reserves by year end at $6.3 million in reserves. Then if you look at the last column, which is next year, you can see that we should end the year with over 2 months in reserve at $16 million. Over on the next page, the chart directly below is this CMEA fund condition. The board was successful in increasing the annual appropriation this year to $175,000. This increase allows the board to disperse more grants to qualified institutions based on the fund balance. As you can see, the fund is healthy to support grant disbursements for many years to come. Lastly, let me quickly touch on the statistical summary details on the next 3 pages. No big surprises. We can continue to see increases in all areas, especially in new applications and issuance of new licenses. Most importantly, our renewals have stayed steady And as you can see, we're still seeing a 3% increase over 2 years ago in the renewals. This concludes the budget update, unless there's any questions.
Well, I have a comment. I was trying to backtrack. It was 2 years ago, 2020, with one of our first meetings, and that was when the reserve was a very big concern for CSLB. And through the work of your department and board members as well, who've been secretary and staff, with all the effort to bring that, we now have a healthy reserve, which is fundamental for any business, especially our model. So thank you very much, Stacy, and everyone else who worked on that. Thank you. So are there any comments from board members at this time? Is there any public comment at this time? As there's no action required of the board, we move on to our next agenda item. Next is the administrative program update, which begins on page 65, and for that, we will invite CSLB Administrative Division Chief Mike Maliza to please update the board.
Thank you, Chair Granzella, and good morning, members of the board. I'll direct you to page 67 of your board packet. I'll begin the administration division update with our personnel unit activities. We'll start with transactions. During the third quarter of fiscal year 2022, CSLB personnel staff completed 50 personnel transactions. This included the addition of 11 employees from other state agencies and 11 employees new to state service. Within CSLB, 9 employees were promoted, which is a great sign, and 14 transferred to different positions. In addition, 2 examination proctors, 1 retired annuitant were hired, and 2 employees accepted training and development assignments. It was a busy quarter. You can also see the total number of personnel transactions per quarter on the tables on page 67, compared to last year's as well. So on page 68, I will review CSLB's vacancies. So CSLB averaged 47 vacancies since the beginning of fiscal year 21-22. The personnel unit continuously works with CSLB hiring managers and DCA, Office of Human Resources, to identify and minimize any delays in our recruitment efforts. We had a lot of recruitment activity, and it brought that number down to this week to 41.5. So we're getting to that normal vacancy rate level. Also on page 68, you'll see updates and highlights, most notably in our career development efforts. The CSLB Career Development and Mentoring Program Steering Committee hosted its 3rd Career Development Live event on April 27th, 2022. These online events highlight each of the CSLB's divisions, the work they do, and the jobs available in those divisions. A panel of staff representing different units within the licensing and examination division spoke to an audience of CSLB employees about the different jobs they perform, the roles of the functions of the different units, the types of classifications utilized in the division, and potential career paths and training opportunities. I'll now take you to page 70 of your board packet to give you an update on our business services activities, starting with our building facilities. We'll start with our West Covina field office. That lease currently will expire November 20th, and staff is working to put all the forms and submit everything to renew that lease. Bakersfield, that lease expires in December of this year, and it's the same thing. Staff is working to get that taken care of. For our Norwalk enforcement office, the current lease expires on October 31st of 2023, and we're working to prepare for the renewal of that lease. As far as our testing office in Norwalk, we will terminate the lease there since we will no longer have testing as we transition to PSI. And lastly, in San Jose, we did plan on closing that location because of our transition to PSI for testing. However, in June for this month, we did keep it open so that we could make sure that we did not have any backlogs and smoothly transition to PSI. So we did keep it open for 1 more month. On the bottom of page 70 and continuing on page 71, you'll see contracts and procurements and process. Most notably, we continue to ensure we have an ample supply of PPE equipment That includes masks, hand sanitizer, wipes, to keep our staff safe in the context of preventing COVID-19 exposure. So this concludes my Administration Division update. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you, Mike. Are there
any
comments from board members?
Through the chair, I have a question. My mic turned off. So on the career development portion,
Oh,
okay, so career development, when you spoke earlier on that, there was internal promotions of like 11. Was a lot of those internal promotions at that live event? And then a follow-up question. I'd like to attend one of those live events. I think it helped me understand a lot about CSLB as a whole. So,
the first one, those promotions happen throughout the quarter. The event is just more informational to assist our staff. But we would definitely love to have you at our next one. We typically have them every quarter. I think IT, I've talked to Jason Perez, but I think we're going to focus on the IT division next. Be happy to have you along. Chair Granzella was very helpful at this one. She did the opening remarks, and it was great for our staff to not only meet Chair Granzella, but also hear from her. So yes, I'll keep you apprised of what our next activities there. And we do these activities so that we can give our staff. Sometimes we work in silos. You might work in the licensing division, but might not know what's going on in administration division or enforcement or whatever, public affairs. So we give them an idea of what we do in a broad sense. Maybe they want to change a career path, but also where they're working right now. Give them opportunities of training, knowledge about the classifications, this and that. So it's just helpful, which in turns helps out with those promotions. So we see those yields in the 11 that I reported that people are promoting. Yeah.
thank you.
Do we have any other comments from the board? Is there any public comment? As there is no action required of the board, we will move on to the next agenda item. Next, please turn to page 73, thank you, Mike, of your board packet for the information technology update.
Thank you, Board Chair Granzella, and good morning, everyone. On page 75 begins the information technology update. CSLB IT is very excited about its current implementation of the software-defined wide area network, or SD-WAN. The SD-WAN enables CSLB to securely support our application growth, our network agility, and to also simplify our branch office implementations. Back in January, CSLB IT concluded its proof of concept at our Norwalk field office. There, and then in May, just recently, CSLB headquarters completed its first phase of the implementation of SD-WAN. We are awaiting the second phase, which is allowing an external vendor to come in and install a redundant network connection here at the site. This implementation has increased the bandwidth along with providing greater visibility to CSLB's network traffic. And I'm happy to report this Friday, tomorrow, Fresno field office will be implemented with this new network solution. The remaining field offices are awaiting the external vendor to complete its network circuit installation. And secondly, the IT division has been committed to complete the exam administration outsourcing project. And in a few weeks, there we go. We'll have completed the fourth and final phase of transferring trade exams over to our contracted vendor, PSI. This was a tremendous effort, not just for the IT division, but also to the licensing division and testing, and also DCA's Office of Professional Exam Services. This transition has been successful, and effective July 1st, we will now move this project into operational phase. This will conclude the information technology update. I am available if the board has any questions.
Do we have any board comments or questions on IT? Seeing none, hearing none. Do we have any public comment? As there is no action required of the board, we will move on to the next agenda item. At our March 25th, 2022 board meeting, I appointed David Delatorre and Johnny Simpson to the nomination committee to recommend to the board a slate of officers for the offices of chair, vice chair, and secretary for the next fiscal year, which starts July 1st. I now turn over the floor to Johnny Simpson to announce the recommended slate of officers.
Here we go. Thank you, Susan. David Delatorre and I have enjoyed serving on the 2022 nomination committee. Thank you for the appointment. We recently met to consider the requests of our fellow board members for the 3 positions that will be open. Our recommendation is the following: Mary Tashard for chair, Diana Love for vice chair, and Michael Mark for secretary. With that, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you. We will now begin the nomination process. For each officer position, I will state the nominated candidate that the committee recommends. Then I will ask if there's a motion from the floor for any individuals the board members would like to nominate. We do not need a motion for the persons that have been recommended by David and Johnny, only if there is an alternative recommendation from one of the board members. All floor nominations will require a second. Candidates will then be given 2 minutes to make their statement or describe why they are qualified for the position. Then we will take a roll call vote for each nominee in alphabetical order. If there is only one nominee for the position, members can vote by yes, no, or abstain when asked to vote. If there are multiple candidates for a position, then board members will vote in alphabetical order by stating the candidate's name they support. The first nominee to receive the majority of the affirmative votes in favor of that person, that is, members voting yes, will win that officer position. I will now proceed to the nomination for the office of chair. The committee recommends nomination of Mary Tykert. Are there any other nominations for the office of chair from the floor? There being no other nominations, clear. I will now close the nominations, and I will read a statement. Mary is not available to make a statement, but is very pleased to accept this nomination. So are there any comments from the public? Mariah, please call roll. Oh, I'm.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Frank Altamira. Aye. Rodney Cobos, excused absence. David Delatorre, excused absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Michael Mark.
Aye.
Oh, I'm sorry. Diana Love.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you. For such a chatty group, I'm not sure this one at a time is going to work. Oh, okay. Next is the nomination of vice chair. The committee recommends the nomination of Diana Love, sitting to my left here. Are there any other nominations for vice chair from the floor? There being no other nominations, I will now close the nominations. Diana, would you like to make a brief statement?
Good morning again, and I accept the nomination recommendation. And I just want to say a few words to a lot of you who are new, who do not know who I am. I live in Palmdale. I was appointed by the governor to represent the statewide senior organization, and I am currently your secretary. I serve on the Public Affairs Committee, and I'm on the Enforcement Committee. And again, I come before you seeking the vice chair position. But I wanted you all to know that I am very pleased to have had that opportunity to be the secretary and to be a part of a historical chapter within CSLB, to have been, since 1929, we were the first all-woman board, and we made history. Myself, the chair, and Mary Tigert, and I'm thrilled and honored to have had that opportunity. And I also wanted you to know that when I talked about being the secretary early on, I wanted to do more than just be someone who read minutes and looked over paperwork. I wanted to be an intricate part of that. So I was very pleased to work with staff and to work with the budget manager, Stacy, who did a fantastic job in educating me and just being there when I needed her and always making that appropriate phone call back to me whenever I called. So thank you, Stacy, for that. And it was my pleasure to be a part of the strategic plan in implementing and adding to it. I found that to be an extraordinary opportunity for us to grow and make change. So with that being said, thank you all for your attentiveness, for your words of wisdom, and just for being there whenever I needed you. And I appreciate your time and your opportunity to be your vice chair and your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. Well said. Are there any comments from the public at this time? Mariah, please call the roll.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Frank Altamira.
Aye.
Rodney Cobos, excused absence. David De La Torre, excused absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Diana Love. Michael Mark.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, excused absence. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mariah. The last nomination is Board Secretary. The committee recommends that Michael Mark be considered. Are there any comments or nominations, any further nominations from the floor? Seeing none and hearing none. There being no other nominations, I will now close the nominations. Michael, would you like to make a brief statement?
Sure. Michael Mark here. I appreciate all of the board and your support in this endeavor. Stacy, I look forward to working with you. I know we have 2 months slated for reserves, but let's try to go for 6 months. So thank you.
It's good to be ambitious. So let's see. Are there any comments from the public? Mariah, please call the roll.
Susan Granzella.
Aye.
Frank Altamira.
Aye.
Rodney Cobos, approved absence. David De La Torre, approved absence. Miguel Galarza.
Aye.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Diana Love.
Aye.
Michael Mark.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mariah. Congratulations to our new officers. it was historic. It wasn't until after a year ago when we were elected that we realized 3 women were the officers of CSLB. And it was like, how? Oh, okay, that's great. But it's been a successful year, and participation by everyone, and certainly a learning experience for all of us. So the newly elected chair, vice chair, and secretary will assume the duties of their respective offices on July 1st. Moving on to committee updates. One of my favorite topics, licensing. Leading us through the licensing and testing portion will be Miguel Galarza. Miguel, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Susan. You'll find the licensing update starting on page 83 of your booklet. I will highlight a few items for the board. Regarding applications, on packet page 84, indicates that the processing time for all applications remains at around 3 to 4 weeks. The goal has always been to drop that processing down to 3 weeks and to maintain it at that level, and to accommodate the staffing turnovers on the application units, working to recruit 2 of the retirees to help with the additional workload. So welcome back the retirees. I would like to also note the high number of pending applications on page 85. The higher number of pending applications for fiscal year 2020, 2021 is a result of the testing administration backlog and occurred due to COVID-19 pandemic closure of the CSLB examination centers between March of 2020 and June of 2020, and December of 2020 and February of 2021. Staff has substantially reduced the backlog as of 2022, which will be eliminated with the transfer of the testing administration to PSI starting next month in July of 2022. If you refer to page 86, note the chart there, the number of upcoming renewals continues to be steady. And we're pleased to inform you that the renewal process times are currently at 1 week. And the shortened processing time is a combination of unit being fully staffed and licensing taking advantage of online services that, quite frankly, I just did a couple weeks ago. So very efficient. Finally, please note that call wait times on page 92 for CSLB Licensing Information Center, or the call center, has been reduced and has filled vacancies, including a supervisory position, which helps with the workload monitoring. In addition, telework schedules have been monitored and modified for more consistent coverage. As a result of these changes, CSLB has significantly reduced the wait times at the call centers and currently more aligned with 2017-2018 statistics. You will find, if you turn to your booklet on page 96 and 97, CSLB has completed the 3rd phase of the transition to the PSI exams, with the final phase scheduled for July 1st. As of June 9th, 2022, there are 619 applications scheduled for their exam through PSI. Our pending exam count, which refers to exams that are waiting to be scheduled, is now below 4,000. The goal has been to be under 4,500, and that will be at the lowest in many years. To accommodate for more testing and to help get the numbers down to 4,000, CSLB reopened the San Jose Testing Center for the month of June, which allowed for scheduling an additional 631 exams. Special recognition is due to the testing staff for their work in transitioning CSLB examination administration to PSI exams and providing coverage for the San Jose Testing Center. As of today, the examination for 34 CSLB licensed trades and 1 law and business exam have been transferred to PSI exams. Finally, the exam development unit has held numerous workshops and continues the occupational analysis work for updating the remaining exams. Fawad, would you please provide an update for the testing efforts?
Thank you, Miguel. Good morning, members of the board. As of July 1st, 2022, per the Senate Bill 607, we will be expediting applications of spouses of military personnel on active duty stationed in California. All licensing fees will be waived, and applications will be elevated to a staff services analyst in the experience verification unit for immediate review and processing.
Thank you, Fawad. That concludes the testing update. And of course, Fawad will be available for the board if they have any further questions. Do board members have any comments regarding my report on licensing?
Miguel, I have a question. On page 92, where we talk about the longest wait time, could you explain to me what that is? Does that mean that the phone is ringing for 31 minutes perhaps, or is it answered and the person is put on hold that long? How does that long work time work?
I'm going to pass the baton over to Fawad as he's got a greater bandwidth on this issue.
Okay.
The wait time starts from the time that actually dialed the 1-800 number.
Okay.
And so it takes about 2 minutes or so to go through the process of, selecting where the call should be directed.
Okay.
And then from there, it waits until it's assigned to a technician.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then one more additional question. When we talk about PSI, which is on page 96, the PSI exam test centers, is PSI an acronym?
No, it's actually, it
That's-
doesn't really stand for it. It's PSI exams.
Okay.
That's the name of the business.
Okay, thank you.
Again, thank you, Fawad.
Actually, I have a question.
Oh,
So we have watched as we still do the examination development in-house with all of our contractors, and we develop those, and those are passed over to PSI. What we don't do now is the administration, the setting up, all of the other things for testing. And we've handed that over to PSI. So I was wondering, have you a mechanism to collect comments or feedback from the people who have taken the test since they've been in effect since April 1st? Has anyone commented? Do you have a plan to report back to us, we hope, on what the acceptance level, how is it going on the PSI administration?
Yes, Madam Chair. We will send a survey after they get the license. We will send a survey. And then recently, what we have seen from the comments that they are pleased with having, because now there is 20 test centers. PSI has 20 test centers, and then more space. So they are pleased to be able to take their exam in much faster and move on. Yes.
Very good, thank you. So we'll look forward to the feedback at the next meeting. Thank you.
Through the chair, I have a question too before we move on. This is more in depth on to page 90 and 91, kind of on the experience verification portion. When we're speaking about it, it's 3% minimum need to be verified on original applications, right? So I see your head shaking. So my question is this: on the page 91 on the table, for the individuals that are showing that they withdrawn their application, are they kind of doing that voluntarily because they know that they do not meet the experience? In your understanding?
You mean the withdrawal?
Yes.
Correct. That is correct. Once we request the documentation for them to prove their experience, sometimes they withdraw the application. Maybe they don't have the document at that time, they're going to reapply at a later time.
So that's disheartening, because then of the denials, you have 46 of the 3%. So basically 100 out of 200 applications total that are actually trying to be going verified or actually showing that they have the experience there. And so, and that's only of the 3% that we're looking at. So 97% that are out there, half of them could not have the proper experience to apply for a license. And I don't know, it's just something, a thought where if we can, I don't know if it'll take legislation, but ways to increase that 3% minimum, because, you know, some fellow board members here who are inspectors, they understand us as a consumer agency, it's kind of disheartening when it could be potential a lot of people not have the experience in the classification that they are applying for. Does that make sense?
I think Dave has a comment.
David?
Yeah, if I could comment on that, just to give you some history on that 3%. The licensing division, I believe, does a tremendous job in reviewing all applications, at least, you know, to make sure that they have the experience that is claimed. Now, the 3% was set up by the board a number of years ago to provide for field investigation. And so what's happening with those apps now is they're being sent back out to, they're now going to be handled by the enforcement offices. They relate to people that are putting down where they have experience, and they can't always show all of the records we'd like to see. But with that 3% poll, we're able to bring those applicants in, talk to them, find out what experience they have. Perhaps we can qualify them, but if we can't, we can provide them information on how they could obtain the necessary experience. I just don't want anyone to think that FOD's group isn't reviewing all apps for the experience, because they are, but they're not like looking at tax records, permit records, going into a real in-depth investigation for most of them, because quite frankly, they really don't have to, because a lot of these applicants, they might have been in an apprenticeship program. They may have worked for a licensed contractor for a number of years that verifies, yeah, this was my foreman. He or she worked for me for the last 7 years. You know, with that kind of testimony, along with some verification, we're able to approve it. I don't know, Fawn, if you want to add anything to that, but I just want to make sure that everybody understands the distinction between the 3% and what is done every day with applications.
Yes, that is correct. We have procedures to follow, you know, like verify the experience. We do make phone calls to the certifiers and other contractors to verify the experience. And as Mr. Fote mentioned, you know, there is, per law, we can only do 3%, and that's required the field investigation.
Thank you for the clarification, and that was by no means saying that the licensing division is not doing their job. It's just kind of an observation from the numbers that are being presented to me. So, thank you.
Any other board members? Not seeing any. Would the public like to comment on this item? Hearing and seeing none. I'm going to go ahead and move on to the next portion of my agenda, which would be the Construction Management Education Account Awards. And if you would be so kind as to turn to page 103 and 104, at the March board meeting, staff reported that the board, the Department of Finance approved an additional $75,000 augmentation to the Construction Management Education account, which allowed staff to invite the schools to apply for their awards at a higher amount. As the chart shows on page 104, staff was able to distribute grant checks to all the schools at a higher amount in April. The next item is Testing Administration Center outsource update. The process of outsourcing CSLB administration to the vendor PSI exams will be complete as of July 1st. CSLB has moved 35 of the 47 written exams to PSI and will be moving, and we'll be moving the remainder of the exams by July 1st of 2022. Overall, the process is running smoothly. As of June 9th, 2022, PSI has administered 443 CSLB exams to applicants, and 619 more are scheduled. In addition, on the IT side of things, the programming process for systems communication between CSLB and PSI is going well. CSLB will be closing all its test centers as of July 1st, 2022. Fawad, do you have anything else to add to this item?
Yes, I'd like to take the time and recognize a couple of units within the licensing and IT division for their work for the transition to PSI. IT, of course, Jason Press and his team did a great job. And also exam development staff have worked hard these last 6 months to create over 80 new examination versions for our 47 exams to send to PSI for administration. They have also printed, laminated, bound, and shipped thousands of booklets to the 20 test centers at PSI. They have put in many hours of work on these projects in addition to their regular workload, and the transition would not have gone as smoothly without the help of everyone in the testing development division. Also, with outsourcing of exam administration less than a month away, exam administration staff continue to go above and beyond, giving excellent customer service to our candidates. The San Jose Test Center reopened at the beginning of June to give Bay Area candidates a more convenient option for their exams. For some candidates, it allowed them to take their exams sooner as exams were being pushed out further into the summer. All of this would not have been possible without exam administration staff from headquarters volunteering to work in San Jose in June to ensure the test center was open for candidates. Thank you.
For what I'd like to also really emphasize that acknowledgement of the IT staff for hitting the target of July 1st and the outstanding work and efficient work they did in making that happen. And before I move on, are there any board members that would like to make a comment on PSI and their achievement? Hearing and seeing none. Oh, Susan?
Okay, I have. So the question again is related to PSI. So the studies we did earlier, there were motivations to move to a larger vendor so that there would be more test centers. And that was at that time going to be offset by our staff having to man, and the leases and systems and all of that. So when we look forward to your report in August about the transition and the customer feedback, could you also provide what the cost was? Just at a high level, did we come close to what we estimated that to be? Dave may have those answers right away, but that would be helpful as well.
Yes, Madam Chair.
And my question is not on PSI. My question is on page 103, the construction management education account. It says on that, it looks like we have two different sources, but under the fund appropriation level, it talks about the Budget Act of 2018. Was there a 2019 and a 2020 and a 2021 Budget Act, or is this a one-time?
That's a great question. What? Would you be so kind as to assist me?
That is an excellent question, Madam Chair. I will get back to you on that one.
Yeah.
Basic question.
No, Stacy, go ahead. Go ahead.
Yeah, we get appropriated every year. So every year it's in the Budget Act for the CMEA since it was established. I don't have that date long ago. So we actually just increased that. It used to be 100,000 we were given to the schools. And then because we were getting so many donations, our account was filling up. So we asked to increase that authority. So they bumped it up to 175. So every year we ask for it based on how much money we have in the account. We have to ask the legislature and the Department of Finance for the authority to increase or decrease based on what is available.
Is that a line item in your budget report that you give?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Oh, yes, it is.
Okay.
And it's appropriated at 100,000 each year, but what Stacy's saying is that we have to make a request for the augmentation each year, and the it'll be granted depending on whether we timely submit it or not.
And thank you, staff, for that assist today. Anyone from the public have any comments on this item? Hearing and seeing none, this concludes my portion of the licensing items on the agenda, and I give you back the board.
Thank you. Learn something new every day. So we are now on the enforcement section of our agenda. I will be turning this over to Steve Grove. After that, we will have a short public affairs update, and we'll take a short break and move on to legislation. So now, thank you, Steve. Take it away.
Thank you, Chair Granzella. I'm Steve Grove, CSLB's Chief of Enforcement. It has been a busy time in the Enforcement Division, and I'm pleased to present you with a quick update of recent activity. The Enforcement Program Update Agenda Item F1 begins on page 113 of your board packet. At the top of that page is a brief paragraph regarding staff vacancies within Enforcement Division. The Enforcement Division has 229 allocated positions out of the 430 board-wide positions. It's been almost a year and a half since we reported on division staff vacancies. For historical perspective, the number of vacant enforcement positions peaked in July 2017 at 31 positions. The division's managers and supervisors worked hard to bring that number down, and although the total number has fluctuated a bit, vacancies have been relatively stable for the last few years, with the total in the mid-20 range. As you can see on page 113, the Enforcement Division currently has 23 vacant staff positions, which is about 10% of the Enforcement Division's authorized workforce. Candidates have been selected and are pending final approval to fill 4 of those vacant positions. The other positions are in various stages of the state's hiring process. The next section of the program update includes summaries of 4 recent field investigations. As these cases illustrate, the Enforcement Division continues to prioritize the investigation of egregious misconduct in the construction industry. The first case on page 113 involves former licensees Salvador and Pamela Chiramonte, who signed contracts with about 40 victims of the 2017 Tubbs fire in the Santa Rosa area. CSLB received multiple complaints from victims alleging the Chiramontes performed substandard work or no work at all after money was paid to them. The investigation was complex and was handled by a peace officer within CSLB's Special Investigation Unit, working closely with the local district attorney's office. The investigators' hard work paid off when the district attorney charged the Chiramontes and their accomplice daughter with 59 felony counts each, including grand theft, diversion of funds, embezzlement, forgery, fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. On April 22nd of this year, Sal Chiramonte pled to 14 felony counts, 1 for each victim, 13 counts of 484B, diversion of construction funds, and 1 count of 368D, elder abuse. He will have a 6-year sentence and restitution of $1.1 million. He's entitled to a restitution hearing to determine final numbers. Amy Perry, Sal's daughter, pled to 1 felony 484B with a 240-day sentence and restitution. Pam Chiramonte, Sal's wife, pled to 1 misdemeanor 484 diversion of construction funds. The Chiramontes still face more than a dozen civil lawsuits filed by their victims. The second case I'd like to point out comes from Shasta County. It begins on page 113. In this case, unlicensed electrician Samuel Crane endangered several Shasta County residents with his shoddy work, including 1 victim who got a dangerous electrical shock from an improperly wired backup generator. CSLB's resident investigator in Reading handled the complaints against Crane. She referred 3 separate cases to the local district attorney for criminal prosecution. Based on her investigation, the DA charged Crane with 2 counts of grand theft. An arrest warrant was issued in May of 2021. Crane disappeared before the warrant was served, but earlier this year, he resurfaced, and new complaints against him started coming in, with 5 complaints lodged in just 2 weeks. Coordinating with CSLB, the Shasta County District Attorney's Office set up an undercover sting and lured Crane to bid on a potential job. Crane was arrested as soon as he showed up at the sting. He was booked into jail on the outstanding warrant. He's now awaiting trial on felony charges in Shasta County. A current statistical overview of the Enforcement Division begins at the bottom of page 114. Please note that all of the division's statistics in the board packet are for the first 9 months of this fiscal year. That is from July 1st, 2021 through April 31st of 2022. During this 9-month period, you will see that the division initiated 15,385 complaint investigations. That's over 1,700 complaints per month and a 20% increase over the same period the previous fiscal year. The next few entries in the program update reveal the number of incoming complaints is continuing to overtake production output. The number of pending investigations is currently 4,777, which is a 9% increase over the figure we reported at the March board meeting. The average number of cases closed per investigator per month continues to be 8, which is lower than our closure goal of 10. And the number of age cases, which is those over 270 days old, is currently 206, a 10% increase over the figure we reported in March. I'm working with the enforcement management team and division supervisors to address these numbers. We're exploring several options for maximizing productivity. Among the options under consideration is modifying telework agreements to provide enhanced supervisory assistance for staff who have shown a substantial decrease in productivity and/or efficiency while teleworking. To address the increase in consumer file complaints, the Enforcement Committee may be asked to consider complaint handling process changes to prioritize the more serious investigations and consider hiring a consultant to review enforcement resources and allocation. The hiring of a consultant is in line with CSLB's strategic plan, item 2.1, that requires evaluating enforcement resources and preparing a scope of work to hire a consultant to present to the Enforcement Committee in July of 2022. The next sections of the program update, which begin on page 115, highlight some of the division's achievements for the 9-month period ending on April 31st. The combined negotiation efforts of the intake and mediation centers and the investigation centers resulted in over $17 million in restitution to financially injured parties. 432 complaint investigations were referred for criminal prosecution by the investigative centers. 1,195 citations were issued, 46% of which were issued to licensees. 257 accusations were filed. 283 licenses were revoked, and 130 licenses were placed on probation. The investigators in CSLB's statewide investigative fraud team, or SWIFT, have also been very busy with their proactive enforcement efforts. For the first 9 months in this fiscal year, SWIFT investigators conducted 11 undercover sting operations, participated in 242 days of enforcement sweeps, and responded to 823 leads. As a result of these activities, SWIFT closed 2,995 cases, 915 of which resulted in administrative or criminal legal actions. SWIFT investigations during this period led to 309 referrals to local district attorneys for criminal prosecution, with 243 of these referrals for contracting without a license. 501 citations were issued, 103 letters of admonishments were issued, 1,133 advisory notices were issued for minor violations, and 243 stop orders were issued for failure to obtain required workers' compensation insurance. Here's a brief update regarding SWIFT undercover operations over the last 6 months. Prior to the COVID pandemic, SWIFT was averaging around 80 sting operations per year. Even then, the major hurdle staff had to contend with when tasked with setting up a sting operation was obtaining a property, whether commercial buildings or private residence. We cannot conduct stings if we don't have a property to use. When the COVID outbreak shut down businesses and schools across the country in March of 2020, SWIFT sting operations came to a temporary halt. Eventually, we resumed scaled-down operations, but it is now even more difficult to find properties with the continued concern over COVID. In 2020, we were only able to conduct 16 stings. In 2021, we conducted 18. So far this calendar year, we have conducted 12 operations, including one in progress this very minute. While the overall number of stings being conducted remains low compared to pre-COVID rates, SWIFT continues to concentrate on making the biggest impact possible with our limited resources, 27 investigators statewide. To illustrate this, SWIFT has conducted stings from one end of the state to the other just since January of this year. In the northern part of the state, Shasta County, in the city of Paradise, devastated by the Camp Fire in 2018, in Sonoma and Monterey counties along the coast, in Fresno in the Central Valley, and in the Southern California city of Vista down in San Diego County. At this time, I would like to give you some highlights from some of these recent stings. On January 19th, a sting was conducted in the town of Paradise. 4 suspects were arrested for unlicensed contracting and faced felony charges because the unlicensed activity took place in a declared disaster area. One unlicensed contractor bid $17,000 for fencing on the sting property, which is well over the legal limit for contracting without a license. Another unlicensed contractor was also charged with possession of methamphetamine and fentanyl. All suspects were ordered to appear in Butte County Superior Court. On February 23rd and 24th, a sting operation in Fresno resulted in 16 unlicensed contractors issued notices to appear in criminal court for contracting without a license. One suspect provided a bid of $16,000 for synthetic turf, grass. During the sting, one of the contractors cited for unlicensed contracting was found to have a no bail warrant for failure to appear in court. He was taken into custody by California Department of Insurance detectives who were assisting us with the operation. On April 13th and 14th, a sting was conducted in San Diego County. A total of 15 people were cited during the operation in the city of Vista after offering bids for concrete work, tree trimming, interior and exterior painting, and window installations. 13 were cited for misdemeanor charge of contracting without a license. 2 others were cited for working as unregistered home improvement salespersons. Most recently, just last week, a sting was conducted in South Lake Tahoe, resulting in 7 suspects receiving notices to appear in Superior Court. One suspect was issued an administrative citation. The highest bid received was $15,000 for a deck replacement. 7 of the suspects were specifically targeted from their illegal advertisements placed on Craigslist. One of the suspects was arrested and transported by the El Dorado County Sheriff's Department on a $5,000 arrest warrant stemming from a stolen snowmobile. The final appointment ended up giving a bid of $3,500 for tree removal, but that was the least of his problems. While running him for wants and warrants, it was discovered that he was wanted on a $25,000 arrest warrant for check fraud. Ultimately, he was also transported and booked into jail. The highly dedicated staff in the SWIFT unit are all eager to return to regular sting operations, but they can't do it without the help from the public, contractors, and industry partners. Finding available properties to use for the operations is the assistance that we need. Please reach out to me or anyone in SWIFT if you or someone you know can assist with providing a property. Agenda item F2 is an update on CSLB's Solar Energy System Restitution Program, or SESRP. And that update begins on page 121 of your board packet. As you know, the Solar Energy System Restitution Program was created by the legislature in 2021. The program provides $5 million to CSLB for the purpose of providing restitution to qualifying homeowners who were financially harmed by a solar contractor through fraud, misrepresentation, or another unlawful act. This is CSLB's first ever restitution program, and division staff did a lot of work to get it up and running. The program became fully operational last October. At the bottom of page 121, you will see some statistics for the solar restitution program, and I have some updated numbers to report. As of June 3rd, 2022, here's where we are with the solar energy restitution program. 210 claims have been received by CSLB. Of these, 64 claims have been approved and sent to DCA for the issuance of checks. The total amount of restitution approved by CSLB is almost $760,000. An additional 17 claims have been closed for various reasons, such as lack of jurisdiction or claim duplication. 2 claims were referred to arbitration, and 127 complaints were pending. Most of the pending complaints are waiting for additional supporting evidence, such as a CSLB paid industry expert inspection to help establish the financial injury. CSLB is continuing with efforts to get the word out about this program. On May 12th, CSLB's Public Affairs Office distributed a new press release describing the program, which was picked up by several Spanish-speaking media outlets. Additionally, in April of this year, CSLB sent letters to prior complainants who were potential program claimants. We received 21 new claims in response to these letters. We're also continuing to collaborate with other stakeholders to maximize the visibility of this unique program. This is informational item only. There's no action required of the board. Are there any comments from the board?
Through the chair, I do have a couple of comments and questions. Steve, I appreciate the work that enforcement does. It really does help tackle that underground economy, especially in California. A couple of questions. One question, you referred to seeking properties from the public. That's probably throughout the state. Is that including residential and commercial properties?
That's correct. Residential or commercial.
Is there any per diem or anything that's provided to those property owners?
Yes, we do have some limited funding to provide a modest fee.
So the public who are watching, you could, instead of Airbnb or another thing like that, you could use CSLB as a way to make some funds. So, thank you.
Mariah, is there any public comment?
Are there any public comments?
There's none at this time.
In closing, I want to thank the enforcement staff for their hard work and continued dedication to consumer protection. I'm looking forward to the proposed July Enforcement Committee meeting where enforcement strategic plan items will be reported on and discussed. And that includes the Enforcement Committee update.
Thank you, Steve, for stepping in. Just to wrap this up, are there any further board comments or public comments? Seeing none, we will move on to Mr. Michael Mark with Public Affairs.
All right, thank you, Chair Granzilla. As Chair of the Public Affairs Committee, I'm pleased to bring you the Public Affairs update today, starting on page 124 and 125 of the board packet. The first part of the update describes the efforts of staff in coordinating CSLB communications with local communities during the 2021 wildfires. And we provided you an update about some of those efforts at our March board meeting. Moving on to page 130, Public Affairs highlights the additional 5 Get Licensed to Build webcasts, which has been hosted since our last board update. 2 of these which were in Spanish. The workshops include Spanish-speaking staff who answer questions in real time. Videos of these workshops are then posted on the CSLB website for further viewing. These fantastic productions give prospective contractors a place to ask questions and learn the process of licensure. Moving on to the page at the bottom of page 130, Public Affairs notes the posting of an additional 4 videos online in Spanish since our last update. Providing multimedia content in English and Spanish is part of the larger Public Affairs strategic plan goal of improving user experience and accessibility. Moving on to page 131, the number of social media followers of CSLB accounts have increased on nearly every social media service since the new year started. A testimony to Public Affairs staff's hard work in getting the word out there about CSLB consumer protection mission. Pages 132 through 135 of the board packet explain more about that growth and outline social media highlights in general, which include posts about important licensing and enforcement topics, as well as special issues of board's priority, such as promoting women in construction. Other posts highlight the statewide investigative fraud team, better known as SWIFT, and when needed, disaster-related posts. Sting-related posts are typically the most popular on social media and get the most interaction from the public. As always, we invite you to follow CSLB on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Flickr. And you can find these links on the CSLB webpage. For stakeholder communications, Public Affairs staff have issued several industrial bulletins since our last update on March. We have issued industrial bulletins on regulatory issues affecting contractors who use forklifts, information about CSLB expanding its licensee examination services, and information about new treated wood requirements for contractors in California. Moving on to page 136, toward the bottom is information about CSLB's ongoing media relations work. Public Affairs regularly fields inquiries from the media on multiple CSLB-related topics and distributes these news releases when appropriate, such as announcing when the next Get Licensed to Build workshop and press releases about unlicensed contractor stings. Moving to page 137, details the ongoing work of California legislators on our consumer and senior scam stoppers workshops. We have had an additional 9 senior scam stopper events to report to you since our March update, which are the between February and April, and the chart on page 138. They've all been virtual senior scam events. Page 139 details the publication and the design services of the Public Affairs staff. They're constantly working on new publications and updating outdated information in older publications. In addition to all the work of Public Affairs staff, they also regularly update the employee intranet site with stories, photos, and information updates. Continues to further CSLB's communications objectives. Since this is an information item, no action is required for the board. I do have a couple other comments. The Public Affairs Department, they make and do everything they can to help inform the public, including the webpage, which is, I would say, one of the greatest tools of the department. And I know it's a correlation with IT, but there's so much news that public affairs does give to the public. And as a whole, we are a consumer-related agency. So is there any comment from board members?
My question is, for our recorded webcast services, do we have anything for the hearing impaired?
What
Signing.
page are you referring to?
Just in general, do we have signing for the hearing impaired on any of our webcast services?
I'm going to defer to Michael.
I don't think we have signers, but we have closed captions on productions, but I would need to check to confirm which productions those are and report back to you, which I will do.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board comment? Any comments from the public? Okay, Chair, that concludes our report.
Thank you. Let's take a 5 to 10 minute break, and we will come back for legislation. All right, let's take our seats. Please return to your seats. I didn't use the gavel, so. Not using it now. All right. The last item on today's agenda, the last items on today's agenda are specific to legislation. I now turn it over to Legislation Committee Chair Jim Ruane.
Thank you, Chair Granzello. We'll begin with the legislative agenda with item A. Item A is an update on previously considered 2021-2022 pending legislation. Beginning on page 145 of your packet, this section of the agenda is an update for the board bills that CSLB has already acted on or discussed. For this reason, I am asking Chief of Legislation Mike Jamnetsky to go in order for each of the bills in this portion of the agenda and provide a brief update on these bills the board has already considered. Mike, is there anything the board needs to know?
Yes, I will move relatively quickly through Agenda H1A, and then we will ask for board comment and public comment after that. So to move through these bills, just an update, AB 646. The board has been in support of this bill for over a year now, and it is moving forward. It relates to removing expunged convictions that were a cause of discipline. If an expungement order is received, the board would remove them from the website. The board is being heard in committee next week, or the bill, rather. AB 1733, this would have provided for remote meetings. This bill did not move out of committee. The board did take a support vote, but the latest update is it is still in committee and did not pass the policy deadline. AB 1747, this is a board-sponsored bill for permit requirements that increase compliance for contractors with Title 24 HVAC installation standards, as well as increasing the civil penalties for a number of health and safety violations. Again, it's a board-sponsored bill, and it's moving along. It's on its way to appropriations. AB 1874, the board may recall in March they took an opposed position on that bill. It was sort of a symbolic opposition because the bill had failed passage, and that bill has also not moved forward. That bill would have related to the $500 threshold for licensure for advertising and contracting and increasing that threshold. AB 2105, this is the bill that provides for half off initial and original license fees for military veterans, and the board is in support of the bill. And we did want to update the board to some technical amendments. There was a phrase in the bill that required some clarification regarding the active duty and honorable status, and we just provided some technical amendments to make sure staff is aware of how to have the veterans provide that information, and that is via the DD 214, which is a process we already provide. So that technical language, thanks to the author's office, was put in the bill. It's otherwise the same bill. So it'll make it a little bit easier for staff to process. And thank you very much to the chair, Jim, for working with us on the technical amends. AB 2374, the board took a support position on this bill in March. This relates to illegal dumping. This bill is also continuing to move forward. AB 1237, the board took a support motion on this bill. This bill also relates to military veterans, and it relates to being called to active duty, and it's already an existing law. But the bill itself just clarifies that definition. And again, and this wasn't something CSLB worked on, but we are in support of it. It was amended to clarify what that term active duty means, and that will also help staff at CSLB as well as other DCA agencies. SB 216, this is the board's sponsored workers' comp bill for workers' comp required for the 4 classifications in the first year, which is the C8 concrete contractor, the C20 HVAC contractor, the D49 tree service contractor and the C-22 asbestos abatement contractor. We did discuss some amendments to that bill at the March meeting, and I had mentioned at the time that they weren't in print. Those amendments are now in print. So the way the bill is operating now is in the first year, those licensees would be required to have workers' comp, and then the remainder of contractors by 2026. And that bill is also moving forward. AB 2890. Oh, that's the end of the previously considered pending legislation. So I went quickly through those. So back to you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mike. This is a status update only. No further action is required from the board at this time. But before we move on, do board members have any comments on any of these items that Mike was speaking about? Is there anything from the public? All right, moving on. The next item is on page 160, begins the bills for the second portion of the legislative agenda today. We are now on page 160, beginning with AB 2894. This bill requires a licensed contractor, if they have workers' compensation insurance, to inform CSLB of their workers' compensation classification code and requires CSLB to post that information on its website. Mike, a little update, please.
Yes, so we discussed this bill at the March meeting, and as you may recall, the board did not take a position. We have worked with Legislative Chair Jim Ruane to work with the author's office on technical amendments. So what's happening with this bill, as mentioned, it does require the workers' comp class codes to be provided to CSLB, and as the bill was written, it didn't provide a methodology for that to occur. It just was kind of a statement in the law. And so we looked at it, and our IT staff looked at it, and it appeared it would require a new form, a separate form than the forms that licensees already submit. And it was kind of unclear the scope of the classifications that the board would input to put on the website. So maybe one contractor has one or two workers' comp class codes, but then other contractors might have many. And so we looked at all of this, and we came up with a fiscal amount for what it would, possibly require the board to process these documents. And we talked to the sponsors and we talked to the author's office, and they were extremely gracious. And they worked with us on some language that would put that requirement in the renewal form, the license renewal form. So as opposed to a standalone form for this particular information, it could be inputted in a form that CSLB already uses, and is submitted by licensees every 2 years for active licensees, and we can tailor that form to include this information. So we were able to get our fiscal down to around $227,000 at the outset to IT staff time to integrate this information into our renewal. The author's office has been extremely helpful, as well as the sponsors, and they have accepted CSLB's technical amendments to figure out a way for us to reasonably process this information. Also, we did suggest a cap of the number of class codes, because again, it's unclear at this time how many class codes a licensee would need to put on the renewal. And we also have to work with WCIRB to populate those class codes into the renewal. So there's some work there. And so again, we've submitted the amendments. I don't think that they're in print at this time, but we're hopeful that they are there, or they will be. And that's the update on 2894. Back to you, Chair.
Thank you, Mike. The staff has not made a recommendation on this bill, which amounts to a watch or neutral or no position. As a result, this is an update only, and no action is required by the board unless a board member makes a motion. Is there any board comment? Any comment from the public? Okay, we'll move on to page 161, AB 2916. This bill provides CSLB direction to publicly disclose a letter of admonishment on a contractor's license for either 1 year or 2 years, depending upon the severity of the alleged violation. As it states in your packet, this bill was amended to its present form a few days before our last board meeting and could not be considered by the board. The packet also notes technical amendments to the bill, which staff worked with the board chair and I to propose to the author. Mike, please update the board about what has happened with this bill.
Yes, so this was another one kind of behind the scenes, and we've mentioned at a lot of different board meetings the way these bills move, fast sometimes before the board gets an opportunity to convene and all discuss them. And so we really, really appreciate the board procedure manual process for working with the ledge chair and the board chair on bills that affect CSLB before the board can discuss and meet and discuss them. And so this was one of those. This bill was amended to its form that affected CSLB a few days before our last board meeting. And so what it did was, you're all familiar with our letter of admonishment program. It's a kind of a formalized warning letter for discipline. So if a contractor is presumed to violate the law, CSLB can elect to issue a letter of admonishment instead of a citation. The law requires that letter of admonishment be posted on the website for 1 year as a not a formal discipline, but as a notification to consumers that the law was potentially violated. Well, this bill, when it was introduced, changed that disclosure period to 2 years. And so we kind of talked about that behind the scenes. We talked about that with Board Chair Ruane and Chair Granzella, and we kind of mentioned how the letter of admonishment program was intended as a formalized warning, and it's not issued for contractors that are alleged to have created egregious violations of the law or for which there's financial injury. Citations are used for those kind of violations. So the purpose of the letter of admonishment was sort of subtle violations. So we worked with the author's office to provide CSLB the authority to determine in which case it could be 2 years as opposed to a mandated 2 years. So that's what we did behind the scenes. And as a result, the author's office, because they were so helpful with the amendments, we did request from the chair and the ledge chair authority to do a support if amended. And so they did do the amends. And then because they amended it, we also worked with our two chairs here to issue a support. So that's where we're at on that bill now, and it is moving forward.
Thank you, Mike. Once again, this is an update only. No action is required of the board. Any board comment?
I have a board comment. So with amendments, it's a support. So you're still not seeking a recommendation from the full board on this bill?
We were able.
Was this printed before or after or amendments?
Yeah, there's no vote on this one because everything I just went through happened between kind of mid-March and mid-April. And so there's a procedure in our board procedure manual. If a measure is introduced that affects the contractor state license law prior to the board being able to convene, that the board chair and the legislative chair jointly have authority to authorize staff to issue a support position. And we were able to, the author's office was willing to provide that discretion for the 1 or 2 years. And because they were willing to do that, we did a support if amended, they amended it, and then we did a support. So yeah, there's no request from the board at this time.
Thank you. Any other board comments? Any comments from the public? Our next item is on page 163, SB 1076. This bill requires the State Department of Public Health and the CSLB implement an education program that would inform Californians affected by lead renovation, repair, and painting requirements. As it states in your packet, staff was able to work with Board Chair and I to provide possible technical amendments to this bill. Mike, please explain everything that is happening with this bill.
Yes, and so I also, I'll mention that, I've been in this job for a few years, and I don't recall this many bills requiring this kind of handling. It's sort of unique. It's not an indication of anything specific, but this was another one. It was amended in March to deal generally with the Department of Public Health and its requirements to implement a federal lead renovation and repair program. Well, it was amended to provide that CSLB jointly work with the Department of Public Health to develop an education campaign and implement an informational campaign to inform members of the public who are required by federal law and also California Department of Public Health rules to obtain certification for lead repair and painting. The staff, again, we contacted Chair Granzella and Legislative Chair Jim Ruane and mentioned that the bill is written there's 5 categories of just like people who need to have this certification through the Department of Public Health. And only one of those categories directly relates to CSLB contractors and or their employees. The others are inspectors, evaluators, lead abatement people, potentially property owners and their employees. And so we just kind of, the board's not, obviously there's no position that's been taken, but we obtained approval for a letter from the chair and the ledge chair to ask the committee and the author's office when it was going through committee for clarification on what CSLB's role would be in this education campaign, because that's a lift, to develop a campaign and potentially inform people of these requirements that are not necessarily related to our constituents or stakeholders, if you will. So how do we educate people that we don't license or, that sort of thing. So we had some conversations, and the author's office is amenable to amending the bill to provide that CSLB provide information after it's been developed by the Department of Public Health. And we did talk with the Department of Public Health, and we did talk to the author's office, and there may be an amendment that does that, which is if CSLB is involved in an education campaign, it'll be distribution of materials that are developed by the Department of Public Health, not a campaign that's CSLB staff puts together. So that's where we're at. It has not been amended, but that's the latest.
Okay. Thank you, Mike. Once again, this is an update only and no action is required of the board. Any board comment? Anything from the public? All right, our next item is on page 165, SB 1164. This bill requires the California Energy Commission, CEC, draft a report to the legislature that would propose development of a statewide HVAC database that stores compliance, installation, and acceptance test documentation for HVAC systems. The bill requires CEC consult with CSLB in drafting a report. Mike, is there anything you want to add about this bill?
So, again, this is somewhat unique. This was it was amended 2 days ago. And so I looked at the amendments, and the content of the bill, what it's requiring, is still going to be the same, but instead of the report that's described in here, so as written, this analysis, as written, it provides that the CEC consult with CSLB to draft a report to recommend to the legislature that this program be developed, which would house permit compliance information for HVAC and permit construction information for HVAC. That program is still being required, but instead of a legislative report, it's the bill is asking the CEC to simply go through the rulemaking process to create the same program. So rather than research it, they're going to draft. The bill would provide that the CEC draft regulations, but what's being requested is the same. There's an HVAC registry and compliance system that would go online, and it would track the purchases of HVAC systems and who purchases them and the license number of the contractor, and ideally track what would be installed with or without permit, or with permits, without permits. And then the second item is a document and data registry to track installation. So one tracking is purchase, the other tracking is installation. The idea is that we try to ensure compliance with the permit requirements of HVAC installations. So I apologize, that was somewhat muddled. The analysis is still the same as to what's being in the packet as to what's being created, but instead of a report to the legislature, the CEC is going to go through the rulemaking process to create this, and CSLB is no longer being consulted, but we are mentioned as an agency, one of many, who could benefit from this system that's going to be created. So that's the rundown. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you, Mike. The staff recommendation is that the board support this bill. This would include the authority for staff to communicate this position in written letters and public testimony. At this time, is there a motion and a second?
Michael Mark motion.
A second.
And I'll clarify, the motion is to go with staff recommendation.
Okay.
And I'll second that.
Okay, Mariah, you got the motion maker and the seconder? All right, thank you. Is there any board comment? Yes?
Mike, just so I'm understanding the underlying bill correctly, so if a consumer has or installs an air conditioning system, they have to register it with the state.
I think what it is right now they're going to create a tracking system for the purchases of HVAC systems, and whether when those systems are installed, whether a permit was pulled, and the sale and purchase of these systems, and who purchased them by license number. My understanding is that this is already required, but this would create a tracking system of this. And then the second would be compliance with Title 24 installation requirements, including the acceptance test requirements. So it's who bought it, whether it was installed correctly with the HVAC requirements in Title 24, and then make that information available to agencies that are identified, and one of which would be CSLB. So my understanding is CSLB would be able to search this registry to search for permit and job installs, and for instance, if it gets a complaint, it could check to see if a permit was pulled for that HVAC system and that kind of thing. That's my understanding. I'm not sure, and I don't believe the consumer is going to be required. I think that was your question. I don't know that yeah, I think it relates to the market, the sale and install of these systems. And then the sales side would be the registry and identify installs, track sales, and by the license number of the contractor who installed them. And then second part of this registry would be the installation part, which is acceptance test installation and permit requirements.
Okay. Any other questions from board members?
Through the chair. Question, Mike, on that, for if there's a permit just for a replacement or a change out, it sounds like it would be for something new being installed for Title 24. My question is if it's something that's just being replaced, changed out, taking one furnace out, putting in a new one, or one unit out, and placing the unit where there wouldn't be any Title 24 testing because it's obviously it's an upgrade, how would you collect that data? Because that wouldn't be there. There'd be just a regular permit for a replacement, showing a replacement, but nothing for a testing of any sort.
I am not sure if that would be tracked by this system. Right now, it's something that the CEC is being asked to research how to do and create this tracking system. I don't know. So you're asking if there's no permit required for the.
But there would be a permit required for the replacement of the unit itself, but the ductwork and the actual testing of that ductwork, there wouldn't necessarily be a requirement for Title 24 for that because it's all existing. There is no change out of that as well. So assuming that everything is working correctly, the only thing you're changing out is the actual unit itself. So furnace for a furnace, a unit for a unit, there's no ductwork, nothing's going to be, there's no testing, it's no more than 10 feet, there's nothing being done. And I just don't know how that would be done. Maybe I'm trying to say if there's somebody that's involved in that, I would love to be a part of it. If they'd like to ask me any questions or I can ask them, that'd be great.
Absolutely. I will make that connection. And one of the things, if the board does vote in support of the bill, and the reason staff recommended the support recommendation is because we have a sponsored bill, AB 1747, that is intended to ensure contractors comply with HVAC permit installation requirements. And this bill sort of aligned with that policy objective. But as to the nuts and bolts of how this would roll out, I will absolutely, regardless of any motion here today, I will reach out to the author's office and make that connection because I think that's important information to have.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Any other comments or questions from the board? Any comments or questions from the public? Mariah, will you please call the roll?
Susan Granzella?
Aye.
Frank Altamura?
No.
Rodney Cobos, approved absence. David De La Torre, approved absence. Miguel Galarza?
Aye.
Alan Guy?
Aye.
Diana Love?
Aye.
Michael Mark?
Aye.
Steve Pinelli?
Yes.
Jim Ruane?
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Tykert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you, Mariah. Our next item is on page 166, SB 1443. This bill changes the statutory sunset date of the CSLB from January 1st, 2024 to January 1st, 2025. Mike, an update, please?
Yes, so in full disclosure, this bill should actually have been in the previous section because the board has already reviewed it and nothing is being requested, but it does, as we discussed in March, it does relate to the sunset date of the Contractor State License Board being extended 1 year because of COVID delays created for all the sunsets for all the agencies. Thanks.
All right, thank you. The staff has not made any recommendation, as Mike said, on this bill, which amounts to a watch or staying neutral. As a result, this is an update only, and no action is required of the board unless a board member makes a motion. Anything from board members? Anything from the public? Okay, our next item is on page 167, SB 1495. As of today, this bill does not affect CSLB. However, the board packet explains that staff worked with the board chair and I to suggest technical amendments to this bill regarding the CSLB solar restitution program. Mike, can you provide some more information about this also?
Yes, this is one more that we worked with the board chair and the legislative division chair to make a technical change to the solar restitution program at CSLB. It involves the disclosure against a license that is subject to a restitution fund payout and whether that license has gone through CSLB's disciplinary process or not. So it was going to be cleanup language. We requested to clarify that portion of this restitution fund. The language is not in the bill, and we did request it, but it has not occurred yet. So there's no staff recommendation today. It's just an update that this occurred. And if there's any questions, I'm certainly available to answer them.
All right, as Mike explained, staff has not made a recommendation on this bill, which amounts to watch or staying neutral. As a result, this is an update only and no action is required of the board unless a board member makes a motion. Any board member comment? Yes.
Mike, I wonder if you just expand upon, and I think you touched it in the description, but, if we're waiting to disclose this until it's revoked or pending revocation, then what's the point?
So when this program was created, it was assumed that a lot of the contractors that were identified, and there was a number of contractors that were identified in this Central Valley as selling these PACE loans and having installations done on these homes. And CSLB wound up revoking a lot of those licenses. A lot of them were unlicensed. And this fund was created to kind of restitute those individuals. So when it was created, it was intended to sort of pay out on these cases where the contractors were not in business. They were no longer established. And one of the reasons for the restitution fund was CSLB's administrative process when it revokes these contractors doesn't really provide for restitution. We can order it as a condition of getting your license back, but that's the end of it. If they don't come back to get their license, then there's no restitution. So it was a pot of money designed for those sort of situations. But what occurred was, in the way the language is written, because it's not a disciplinary process, this restitution fund, it's a sort of just payout if we can establish some injury. The statute of limitations that CSLB has to investigate, we can receive and pay out on claims outside of that statute of limitations. So we can receive a claim that a contractor did something wrong and pay the consumer without going through the disciplinary process, but the contractor is still in business. So there was a 1-year window in the statute. And so what we were finding was there are some contractors who are subject to these payouts who dispute the claim. And CSLB can't investigate it because the statute of limitations has passed. So what this would do is just make sure that the disclosure, when a payout is made, goes against the contractor who's been subject to the disciplinary process. Dave, is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, just, we had a lot of injured solar customers in 2016. And so when that fund was created, we wanted to be able to provide restitution to those consumer victims. And what we find is that we have contractors that did cause the harm, yet we can't investigate the complaint because we received the complaint more than 4 years from the time the work was performed. Now, our dilemma in those cases is that the contractors believe rightly that they have no obligation to make that consumer financially whole. And it's unfortunate they're not doing that, but when we send it to arbitration, we're in a situation now where a contractor does not have any financial responsibility to pay the fund back or pay the award, but yet would have disclosure on their license for 7 years. And so they will fight that fund payout for that reason. And the fund payout parameters don't require the same level of proof we would need to take an administrative disciplinary action. So it puts all parties to this in a bad spot. And that's why we're hoping that we would have a legislative change where we wouldn't have to put the 7-year disclosure on for those contracts that were entered into in 2016.
And to say it another way, if we had received a complaint, this is for complaints that, the whole thing of restitution is to make people whole where there's not really another remedy. And if CSLB gets a complaint within its 4 years, CSLB will try to remedy. Well, if we get a complaint against the contractor within the 4 years, we're not going to send it to the restitution fund. We're going to investigate it to determine if we can have the contractor fix it, possibly order a financial injury to the consumer, that sort of thing. There were cases with the way this law is written, this restitution fund, is we couldn't remedy it for the consumer and the program would pay out and then it would go on the license record as disclosure, but the contractor doesn't really get a hearing or, ability to challenge the disclosure. So disclosure could be seen as kind of penalizing without sort of the penalizing process. So this would change it. So when we're making the payout, we're doing it in the case of contractors that are already revoked. And we're notifying that the payout has occurred, but the administrative part has already happened. The disciplinary part has already happened. The revocation's already occurred. The important thing is the consumer getting the money. And yes, there will be one more disclosure. In addition to the revocation, you've also been subject to a payout from the restitution fund. Does that make sense?
Mike, if I could just add one thing to I think you said it very well. If we have jurisdiction to investigate the complaint, the fund won't pay out. So we do get a lot of claims where someone hasn't filed a consumer complaint, they just would like a fund payout, the contractor's still in business, that contractor is required to pay whatever restitution is owed, and if they don't, then what we would do is issue an accusation to suspend or revoke the license. Once we have that accusation of referral, or we believe we have the evidence to support it, then the fund can pay out.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else, Mike?
Nope.
Okay. Once again, the staff has not made a recommendation on this bill, which amounts to watch or staying neutral. As a result, this is an update only, and no action is required of the board unless a board member makes a motion. Anything else on board member comment? Anything from the public? Okay, our next item is on page 169, the PACE Recovery Fund legislative proposal. As your packet states, the Legal Services Group reached out to CSLB and the Department of Financial Protection and Innovation about placing a $60 million restitution fund at CSLB for consumers who were harmed by contractors who sold them property assessed clean energy or PACE loans. Staff provided an update to the board about these conversations at the March meeting. The conversations with the sponsors behind this idea continued into May. So this agenda item is here for staff to provide additional updates on this proposal. I'll turn this once again over to Mike as well as David Vogt for any updates. Mike and David.
I do not have too much to update beyond what's in the packet. The budget bill does not include that I could locate an appropriation for this fund. We haven't heard from subcommittees. And so I do know, I was able to get a hold of the budget request letter from the sponsors. I just recently was able to get a hold of that. And it's actually a $65 million request to the legislature, but I've not received, again, I don't believe that it's in the budget bill is written. It's not in any trailer bills that I've located. So I don't have much to add, but I do believe we have sponsors, or the coalition potentially might be here to make a comment. And also we may have some representatives from the PACE industry to make a comment. But that is the information that I have.
Thank you. Staff has not made a recommendation on this item, and as a result, this is an update only and no action is required of the board unless a board member makes a motion. Any questions from the board? Comments? Anyone from the public? No public comment? All right, that completes the update on 2021-2022 legislation. Let's proceed to the CSLB regulatory matters. Our agenda item 3, regulations. We are now on page 173 of the packet. Before we begin the discussion of this item, I'd like to ask the board chair if she has any comments. Susan?
Yes, excuse me, I do. I'd like to, my comment is that we have board member Alan Guy, who is here with us in the room, represents B General Building Contractors on our board. Alan has asked for guidance regarding whether it is a possible conflict of interest as it relates to the battery energy storage system, or BESS, agenda item, because he is an officer on Anvil Builders and Anvil Power, Inc., that have a C10 classification and is a signatory for the IBEW. After discussion with legal counsel, it was determined that Alan does not have a conflict of interest or need to recuse himself from voting on the BESS agenda item because he has no financial stake in the outcome, and more importantly, has indicated that he can be fair and impartial in the voting process. Back over.
Thank you, Susan. And with that said, the first item of discussion is H2A, review, discussion, and solicitation of public comment on the expert report regarding a recommendation for possible regulatory rulemaking that would authorize a C46 solar contractor to install battery energy storage systems to an appropriate kilowatt-hour threshold. Before we begin discussion of the expert's report, recommendation for possible regulatory rulemaking, I'd like to make some brief comments about regulatory rulemaking in general. To be very clear, regardless of any discussion of this agenda item or any board vote in the next agenda item, no laws are being made today. No license classification descriptions are being changed today. What the report does provide a recommendation for the board if it elects to authorize CSLB staff to commence the regulatory rulemaking process that is required if the board is going to change the contractor license descriptions in its regulations. The rulemaking process is designed to provide the public with a meaningful opportunity to participate in the adoption of regulations and to ensure the creation of an adequate record for the Office of the Administrative Law. This includes the opportunity for the public to comment on any proposed regulatory text. The rulemaking process has not begun. All of the discussions that have occurred at public meetings on this topic over the years has been information for the board to consider as part of the concept stage that occurs prior to the start of any regulatory rulemaking. Even if the board votes in favor of starting the rulemaking process today, the public will still have opportunities to comment on any classification change before it ever becomes law. At this time, I invite the board's regulatory counsel, Danny Rogers, to provide the board a little more information about the regulatory process. Danny?
Good morning, board members. I am Danny Rogers, regulatory counsel for the board. I'm here to provide an overview of the regulatory process and answer any questions that you have. Once the board votes on and approves proposed language, it will be board staff's job to draft regulatory documents, including a notice and initial statement of reasons. This phase can take anywhere from 30 to 90 days, depending upon how expeditiously staff can act to assemble package documents. Once this step is complete, the process begins with the filing of notice with the Office of Administrative Law. This commences the 45-day comment period, during which members of the public can comment on proposed text. The board may hold a public hearing on the proposal if one is requested, and the public can make further comments at this hearing. After the hearing, if held, staff will review any public comments received, prepare proposed responses, and evaluate whether to propose any modified text based on the comments. If the board chooses to modify text, there will be an additional 15-day comment period in which the public can make any additional comments on the modifications. Once the comment period is concluded and the board has approved responses to public comments, the package will be filed with the Office of Administrative Law. That office then has 30 working days to review and approve the regulations. Does anyone have any questions?
Any board members have questions of Danny or the regulatory rulemaking process?
Thank you.
I'm not sure if my comments are in line with what you just said, but I'll ask it and then you can tell me.
Certainly.
I've read several pieces of documentation, and I want to know, is there anyone here from the, that can speak on the fire codes? There seems to be, from what I am reading, some discrepancies in the capacity of homes when we're talking about the 80 kilowatts. And so I'm reading, like it says, the capacity of 232 kilowatts in some places for small businesses and homes. Then I'm reading that the fire codes say 80 kilowatts is the maximum allowance. Can anyone clarify that for me?
I would defer to Mr. Jimnetsky to comment on whether he might know of any members of the public to comment on that today.
Yeah, I don't want to speculate as to who's in the audience, but I believe we will hear public comment on this very topic.
Okay.
That would probably clarify some of your questions, and if not, we'll find a way to clarify it and provide it.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Any other board questions or comments? Okay, thank you, Danny. With that said, I'd like to provide a summary of the board's actions to date on this topic. As the report to be discussed today explains, for several years, CSLB staff has received written and oral testimony on whether and to what extent C46 contractors should install battery energy storage systems from the two primary stakeholders with differing views on the issue. The California Solar and Storage Association, or CALSA, representing the C46 solar contractors, and the National Electrical Contractors Association, International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers Labor Management Cooperation Committee, IBEW-NECA, representing the C10 electrical contractors. In 2019, the CSLB Legislative Committee, as well as the full board, held public meetings to invite stakeholder comments from these groups and other interested parties on the contractor appropriate license classifications to install battery energy storage systems. In December 2019, the board accepted a legislative committee recommendation that an outside consultant be retained to review and make a recommendation regarding the appropriate classifications to install battery energy storage systems. At that time, CSLB entered into contract with UC Berkeley to serve as a consultant. UC Berkeley presented their completed study to the board in July of 2021, concluding that precluding C46 solar contractors from installing battery energy storage systems would have a public safety benefit, minimal adverse economic impacts, and would benefit the workforce. In November of 2021, CSLB staff developed a proposal to preclude C46 contractors from installing battery energy storage systems, consistent with the UC Berkeley recommendation, but it was not approved by the board. The board directed staff to develop alternative language that may be acceptable to the electrical and solar stakeholders. The March 2022 board meeting packet describes the efforts of staff between November 2021 and March 2022 in holding multiple meetings with a number of different groups, including the interested stakeholders, and an agreement could not be reached on acceptable language. At the March 22 meeting, the board directed staff to retain an outside consultant to provide CSLB an assessment of whether, 1, authorizing a C46 solar contractor to install BESS to a kilowatt-hour threshold within 50 kilowatt-hours or another appropriate range supported by existing codes is prevalent among C46 contractors in the construction business, and 2, and whether such a threshold is consistent with ensuring public safety. The CSLB staff report in consultation with expert consultants has been published, and copies are available in the back of the room, as well as on CSLB's website. The purpose of the expert was to assist CSLB in providing facts and evidence based on their experience and expertise. that would support CSLB amending the C46 solar contractor regulation with a reasonable and defensible kilowatt-hour threshold above which the installation of a battery energy storage system would be no longer authorized in the C46 classification. The report recommends that the board consider amending the C46 solar contractor classification to expressly permit them to install a BESS up to and including 80 kilowatt hours when installed at the same time a solar photovoltaic PV energy system is installed as incidental and supplemental to the solar photovoltaic energy system installation. The report describes the reasons why this threshold will preserve the existing regulatory classification framework, is consistent with public safety and state codes, and is prevalent within the construction business. Registrar Foat, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Legislative Chair Ruane. CSLB's review of this matter began in 2016, more than 6 years ago. As Board Member Jim Ruane stated, numerous stakeholder meetings have been held and information received from solar and electrical industry representatives. Regrettably, efforts to develop a mutually agreed upon proposal for board consideration have not been successful. As we'll likely hear today, the two industries remain far apart on a solution. The CSLB staff report to be discussed today includes reference to a meeting with the State Fire Marshal and CSLB subject matter experts. I want to clarify that while the report relies on a lot of information from a number of different sources in supporting its findings, for the purposes of the proposed 80 kilowatt hour limitation, the expert consultant is Joe Berrigan. Staff worked with Mr. Berrigan in the development of a proposal that will not compromise public safety and will benefit the public by authorizing the C46 classification to continue to install battery energy storage systems on most residential and light commercial projects when paired with the solar system. CSLB staff is of the opinion that after many years of presenting this topic at public board meetings, discussing facts, evidence, and research reports, the CSLB must commence the regulatory process to include battery energy storage systems within its specialty contractor regulations. Thank you. Back to you, Jim.
Thank you, Dave. Before we invite the board to provide any comments or ask any questions about the report, I'd like to thank staff for their efforts in preparing this report. It presents the information clearly, and the findings appear to be reasonable based on the facts and information provided in the report. I will now ask the board for comments on the report. I will then open it up to public comment on this agenda item. To allow us enough time to conduct our full schedule of business today, I'm limiting public comment to 2 minutes apiece. Finally, for the public, please be sure to sign in. Makes it a lot easier for us on the sign-in sheet outside. This will ensure you are properly identified with your comments in the public minutes of this board meeting. I'd ask now for board comment.
Are you ready to accept a motion that we can talk on, or?
I'd rather receive board comment than public comment, and then we can talk. Anything from the board?
All right, this has been going on for a long time. We've heard both sides on this issue, and for some of the newer board members, we've listened to these comments for years now. We've done our due diligence on it. It's time to act, and I am in support of the recommendation by staff here to begin the rulemaking process. I'll say that up front. So. We've heard it all before. We can say it again, but we've heard it all before. So thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from the board? Yes.
So I've thought long and hard on this, and thinking about technology, and thinking about progress, and thinking about how things evolve, and there was a time back in the 80s when I had a super hot computer. That was a 286 computer. And, I had a big 8-inch floppy disk, and, I was pretty good. I thought I had the best that the industry could offer. And Slowly and surely, that became obsolete. Every 2 years, it became obsolete. And, you know, as we move away from fossil fuels, I can't help but think about, you know, what the demands on a home were back in the 50s and what they are today. And what will they be in 10 years as we move away from fossil fuels? And are we selling a kilowatt hour that potentially will be significantly lacking in 10 years and won't create, where the intent today is to you know, make sure that it's incidental for residential, in 10 years could be obsolete due to more and more utilities being incorporated into the home that are electrical. And obviously the improvements in battery and BESS systems and innovations that will create a greater capacity in a smaller space. So those are some of my concerns that we, you know, are not, although today may seem to be an appropriate place to set the bar, and but where will we be in 10 years? And does it merit having a situation where we are sunsetting this to allow for an adjustment as the industry improves? So we reset the bar so that we don't disenfranchise small business or workforce people that have invested their careers in this industry. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, can I make a brief comment? So for the purpose of this item, there's no board motion that's necessary. It's for the next item.
Right.
We're just soliciting board comment and then public comment.
That's right. I was going to bring that up. Any other comments from the board? Diana?
Mr. Chair, my question, I believe, is going to be to Michael. As we move into the legislation process, if we go that direction, I know that our Vice Chair, Mary Tiger, played an integral role in some of these meetings, and she's not here for me to hear her comments or recommendations. When we go into that legislative process, does the board have an opportunity to weigh in once it goes that far into that next step?
So the regulatory process will, if there is draft language that is accepted by the board today to begin the regulatory process, if that draft language changes, it'll be brought back to the board. Or if there's a need to change the language, it'll be brought back to the board to review that before we move forward with any language at all. Does that answer your question?
No, so there's no communication with the legislation committee to produce the draft process with the board? If board members wanted to call and weigh in their thoughts and opinions, suggestions, can they do that?
Once the regulatory process begins, we can reconvene and work with the board as issues arise. But if so just to reconvene the legislative committee during the regulatory process?
Well, no, that's not what I mean. I'll give you a hypothetical.
Sure.
Wait, Board Member Love, what we're asking today is just to begin the rulemaking process. Any proposed text would circle back with the board for final approval, and obviously Mary Teichert's input as well. So this is just the beginning stages. It's a small step, but it's one step forward in this overall regulatory process.
No, that part I understand, it will come back to us.
Yes.
But what I mean is if it goes to the legislative committee to start hypothetically, if I wanted to pick up the phone and call Michael in the process of it being drafted and have suggestions or questions or whatever, can I do that?
Yes, so I think that would require a board motion to refer it to the board's legislative committee, if that's the route they want to go as part of the regulatory process. It's not necessary, but if the board is inclined to do so, it may do so.
Okay.
Anything else from board members?
Through the chair. So I have a question on the report itself. That's what this is, board comments on, right? So it's my understanding, like the average kilowatt that's being installed now, I don't know where I read it, but it was like 50 or 20 for like residential, 35-ish for commercial kilowatt hours. Is that actually, that's correct? That's the correct average right now for residential projects, around 20 and 35 for commercial BES systems standalone?
So on page 13 of the report, the data that was used to come up with the two bullets in the middle of that page came from the UC Berkeley report. And this report does describe how these numbers were arrived at. And it is from the UC Berkeley report, and the conclusion, or the data from the UC Berkeley report, was that the average capacity for residential projects was 15.79 kilowatt hours, and for non-residential projects, it was 33.34 kilowatt hours.
Okay, thank you. So with staff recommendation of 80, then it kind of targets that future industry too, is what I'm kind of hearing, of the current average comparable to future, or what this limitation would be for the staff recommendation.
Yeah, I would just state that 80 kilowatt hours is higher than the 15.79 and the 33.34. I don't want to conclude. I don't want to conclude anything. But what I will say is that these numbers are a compilation of 2015 through 2020 from interconnection data throughout the state. So they're grid-tied systems.
Thank you.
Anything else from the board?
Jim?
Yes.
I noticed in the report that there were some unresolved issues, and that the report was completed on June 3rd. Has staff looked at or done any investigation, or has any recommendations with regards to the unresolved issues? Starting on page 15. Specifically, the issue about being able to maintain systems that are installed.
Right. So between 15 and 16, the two unresolved issues are the issue of a C46 contractor taking a contract to install just a battery, and doing so on a system that they may have, a solar system that they may have installed in the past. And that issue, as presented in the report, the recommendation would be that staff and the board would receive public comments on that issue during the public comment period in the regulatory process, and then we would be required to respond to each of those comments. And then for the regulatory, or the issue, the second issue, the economic impact, it would be the same situation. We have to determine the economic impact by law during the regulatory process or present that information, impact to California businesses, and provide an economic analysis during the regulatory process. So while they weren't directly addressed by the report, they were left out to be addressed through the administrative rulemaking process that's required through the Administrative Procedure Act.
Any other questions or comments from the board? All right, thank you. As we discussed earlier, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes. At this time, I will now invite public comment. Please form a line at the side of the room, and thank you very much. Thank you. Please state your name and your association. Thank you. No, push the button.
Great, thank you. Good afternoon, Heather Minner. I'm legal counsel for CALSA. Before the board begins the rulemaking process, it should make sure it has a rational rule that does not unduly burden the solar industry and its customers. This is not that. The 80 kilowatt hour threshold will be incredibly harmful to the solar industry. I want you to consider that the most common battery installed for small commercial projects is the Tesla Power Pack, and that has a 232 kilowatt hour threshold. So you would be cutting off solar contractors from all of that work. We've also reviewed the interconnection data and found that there are, for grid-tied residential projects, there are 760 already that have batteries exceeding the 80 kilowatt hour threshold. Batteries exceeding that threshold are also common in off-grid residential projects. This impact will not just affect solar contractors who have a C46 license only, but will also affect contractors with a dual license, a C10 and a C46, because it would require those contractors to use certified electricians for their battery work, and there are not enough certified electricians available for those contractors to come into the solar industry and perform these projects. Also, not only is this going to be incredibly harmful to the industry, there's no justification for it. There have been no incidences of problems with battery installations by solar contractors. None have been brought to the board's attention in the 6 years since we started this process. The number 80 kilowatt hours is pulled from the fire code and the residential code table, and the state fire marshal recently clarified that 280 is the appropriate aggregate number from that table. The report recognizes there's a problem with this, and so tries to justify it with this new concern that brought up the first time with solar contractors
That's 2
tying
minutes.
to three-phase. They do that every day when they install solar panels and batteries. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please. Please state your name and your association. Thank
Good morning, board members. My name is Mike Mendoza. I'm a state certified electrician, and my comments today are about C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. As a state certified electrician, this is an issue of safety, of equity, and precedent. This is not an issue of union or non-union. The vast majority of C10 electrical contractors are non-union shops, but all C10 electrical contractors are required to use certified electricians to perform electrical work. This is no different than requiring a solar contractor to hold a roofing contractor license if they want to replace a customer's roof before installing solar. And after listening to the SWIFT report earlier this morning, I'd say it's kind of important. Thank you.
Thank you. Next.
Good morning, members of the board. My name is Joel Pickett. I'm a California State Certified Electrician. My comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. This is also not about trying to take away jobs from C46 solar contractors. Most C46 solar contractors already have a C10 license employing state certified electricians or other licenses that allow them to install energy storage systems. This matter is based on CALSSA's making outlandish and misleading claims in order to protect their 300 contractors that won't be able to expand into energy storage work without the proper licensing and without investing in additional safety training for their workers. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Next, please.
Hi, my name is Megan Stimler. I've been here before. I'm representing my family's C46 solar company, Solar Hut in El Dorado County. We've been installing batteries since 2008. We're kind of the old school battery people. We know what we're doing. We have contacted many C10 contractors in our area to see if they would like to help us with the installation of batteries. Those have all gone unanswered. They don't want to do it. They're making their money on new builds, generators, all those types of electrical fields. We are the experts. We're trained, we're certified. We know what we're doing. We are the solar companies. You're gonna limit the expert knowledge on battery installations. You're gonna remove the ability for us to retrofit our customers to add batteries. we are experienced. The demand for adding batteries increases every day. I get many phone calls every day from my customers asking, when can I get a battery? How do I add a battery? The demand is coming. And between California's demand for clean renewable energy, public safety shutoffs, the changes of time of use rates, increase of electrical car demands, batteries are the future of California. Please don't limit our ability to move forward in advancing technologies. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good morning, board members. My name is Rene Cruz Martinez. I am a utility employee, and my comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I respectfully disagree that there is any compelling justification to expand the scope of the C46 contractor license regulation to further overlap the scope of the C10 electrical contractor's license. However, if the board were to amend the C46 license to expressly allow some installation of battery energy storage system when paired with solar PV, a limit based on the size of the battery energy storage system would make more sense from a technical, safety, and economic perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good morning. My name is Charlotte Stevens. I'm a utility employee. And my comments today are about this C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. As a utility employee, this is an issue of safety, of equity, and precedence. This is not about union jobs. The vast majority of C10 electrical contractors are not union shops, but all C10 electrical contractors are required to use certified electricians to perform electrical work. This is no different than requiring a solar contractor to hold a roofing contractor's license if they want to replace a customer's roof before installing solar. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Natalie Higley, and I work in the electrical industry. Enforcing traditional contractor license classification requirements would have no meaningful impact on solar and energy storage installation other than to improve safety and quality. The 300 or so C46 contractors who don't hold an additional license that would allow them to install energy storage systems are responsible for just 6% of solar installations in the state and just 3% of energy storage systems. The staff proposed amendment allowing C46 contractors to install battery energy storage systems up to 80 kilowatt hours in size is going to turbocharge the percentage of battery energy storage systems that are performed by contractors who only hold a C46 license and do not use certified electricians. I don't think that's fair to the rest of the industry, and I support clarifying this through a regulatory rules-making process, and I encourage staff to consider lowering the threshold size.
Thank you.
Good morning, board. My name is Rachel Shoemake, and I am a California State Certified Electrician. My comments today are about C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV systems. I'm in support of a threshold that's consistent with the existing contractor classification and regulatory framework, allowing incidental and supplemental work. At a certain size threshold, a battery energy storage system is so large that it cannot reasonably be considered incidental and supplemental to a solar PV system installation. At some size limit, it must be considered its own separate system. Personally, as a state certified electrician, I think a reasonable limit should be a maximum of 5 kilowatt hours, but at least staff is proposing a threshold based on existing code standards. I support moving forward with regulations. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, board. I'm Juan Perez. I'm a California State Certified Electrician. My comments today are about C46 only contractors installing energy storage with partial PV solar. This is not about trying to take jobs away from C46 solar contractors. Most C46 contractors already have a C10 contractor license or roofing license that allows them to install energy storage systems. This whole matter is based on CALSSA making outlandish and misleading claims in order to protect their 300 contractors that want to be able to expand into energy storage work without the proper licensing and without investing in additional safety training for their workers. Safety is key here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, all. My name is Georgina Halafia, and yes, I am a state certified electrician. I went through the process of doing what I needed to do to get this card from the state, and I think it's only fair that anybody installing anything in regards to an electrical system is required to have one of these. I agree with setting a kilowatt hour capacity threshold for energy storage. For energy storage work performed by C46 contractors and incidental and supplemental to solar projects. These systems are dangerous the larger they get. Both national and state codes and standards set installation and fire safety requirements based on battery capacity. At a certain size, it defies logic to consider an energy storage system to be incidental and supplemental work. Let's move forward with the regulations to clarify this issue. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning, Board. My name is Peter Seberg, and I'm a California State Certified Electrician for over 14 years. My comments today are solely about C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I wholly agree with setting a kilowatt hour capacity threshold for energy storage work performed by C46 contractors as incidental and supplemental to solar projects. These systems are more dangerous the larger they get. Both national and state codes and standards set installation and fire safety requirements based on battery capacity. At any size larger than the proposed 80 kilowatt hours, defies logic to consider an energy storage system as incidental and supplemental to the solar system. Please, let's move forward with regulations to clarify this issue. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good morning, Board. My name is Will Smith, and I've been in the electrical trade since 1999. I've been state certified since 2005. I've actually spoke here in front of you guys in 2019. My comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I think I'm just going to go off script. To be honest with you, I'm just standing here as a common man, and I use common sense on a daily basis, and my common sense has went well for me. And the reality is we live in a state where when you go to the barber or you go to a beautician, they're expected to be licensed by the state before they work on your hair. Now let's think about our most precious commodities being our homes, being what is inside of our homes, our property, as well as our children and our families. So in this instance here, we're going to allow people to place, ultimately these are generators, these photovoltaic panels on the roofs of these houses and install battery systems without being licensed. My common sense says there's something a little wrong there. So I hope you guys take this and think about this before you make your decision. Appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Board. My name is Stephen Booker. I am also a state certified electrician. My comments today are about C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with photovoltaic solar. I support limiting the size of battery energy storage systems that may be installed by C46 contractors as incidental and supplemental work to a solar project. While they can be paired with solar voltaic systems, energy storage systems pose a unique and heightened fire and life safety risk. If installed improperly, they can overheat, explode, burst into flames, leak hazardous chemicals and gases, or discharge intense blasts of electricity. Moreover, the level of risk posed by an energy storage system directly correlates with its storage capacity. For this reason, the Fire Code establishes various size thresholds above which additional installation safety measures are required. I think 80 kilowatt hours is on the high end of what should be allowed, but support having staff move forward to create certainty for the industry. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Greetings, board. My name is Jason Gumatautau. I'm a state certified general electrician from the city of Oakland, and I'm going to speak about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage paired with PV. There was a comment made about not having enough certified electricians, and I'm going to just focus on that a bit. I'm one of over 200 certified electricians in the city of Oakland, and last I checked, their C46s. They don't hire electricians like us. So I'm here to just hopefully ask you, or politely ask you to consider equity and opportunities in the city of Oakland and other cities in California with regard to C46. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Brandon Carlson. I took a red-eye flight up here, and I'll take a red-eye flight home. So I'm from Southern California. I am a licensed C10 electrical contractor. I'm an E1, E2 ICC certified electrical inspector. I've written or assisted with the NREL, IREC, NEC 2020, energy storage for the residential code, worked with the fire code. I sit in codes and standards daily. I donate about 40 to 50 hours a month in volunteer time just in codes and standards on energy storage. I train local AHJs, the inspectors. I work with utilities for interconnection. I've been in the industry for about 25 years now. I'm here on behalf of the C46s because I think there's a lot of information in the staff report that is misleading or wrong. The expert witness that you guys utilized, Joe Borrigan, although he is qualified as far as an E2, he doesn't quite understand the difference between three-phase and single-phase with energy storage interconnection. I'd love to donate my time with staff to address some of the concerns in there, because some of the solutions that are being proposed, including the 80 kilowatt hour threshold, is problematic because that's capacity, not discharge rate. So if we're talking about safety issues with energy storage and who's licensed and who's not, both C46 and C10 in the eyes of the electrical code are qualified personnel under Article 100. They both studied the NEC to pass their tests. The NEC, Article 690, 705, and 706 deals directly with energy storage. C46 test talks about photovoltaic, interconnection, and energy storage. The C10 test does not. That doesn't mean they're not qualified, but both had the same training material to pass those examinations. My flight doesn't leave until like 6, so if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to donate my time and stay afterward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you for your comments.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Derek Cole. I'm a state certified electrical worker, and my comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I see no justification to expand the scope of the C46 license to further overlap with the C10 electrical scope. If the CLB were to amend the 46 license to expressly allow some installation of battery energy storage systems when paired with solar PV, limit base for the size of the battery storage system, then that would make more sense. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Martin Hertzfeld. I'm a licensed contractor. C46, C10, C7, D31, D56. I'm also an Interstate Renewable Energy Council Master Trainer Emeritus. There's 6 of us in the United States. I'm an underwriter's laboratory. PV systems, installer systems would also include energy storage along with photovoltaics. There's about 3 of those here. I'm an ICC certified residential inspector, so I specialize also in residential systems too as well. If you look at your packet in 810, it's not in compliance. It doesn't match the 706.2 definitions. So the word device should not be there. The word would be component. Components are part of systems. Also, I suggest that if you correlate the fire code, the International Fire Code, you'll see that it's 600 kilowatt hours. That's what I would suggest if you're going to go down that path. I strongly suggest not making any changes. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
In other words, leaving the classification as it is. Okay.
Thank you. Next, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Dustin Sable. I work for a contractor. My comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. What I can't get under that logic, what's to prevent them from installing an HVAC system? I'll respect the staff's recommendation, but let's not lose sight that these are separate systems with separate.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Alex Landsberg. I'm Research and Advocacy Director for the San Francisco electrical construction industry. I'm here to support establishing regulations for the use of for C46 contractors on energy systems. I think one thing that's really been left out, at least I certainly didn't hear it while sitting outside, is that we're talking about really just a handful of contractors who have all the ability in the world to get a C10 license. Let's be clear about what this is. This is a play for a small, potentially shrinking sector to try to go into a whole nother sector of work that is beyond the scope. We keep hearing inspectors and we keep hearing C46 contractor advocates talking about the testing that C46 contractors are doing. That's not the point. The point are the qualifications of the workers actually doing the installation. If we take a look at the records from the CPUC, we take a look at who's actually doing this work, it's overwhelmingly C10 contractors. If we take a look at our state's high road workforce development plan, what do we see? We want to see upskilling. We don't want to throw a growing sector to an industry that doesn't train systematically, doesn't provide advancement opportunities, and has a huge academic literature talking about it being poor jobs. So allowing the C46 contractors to enter into this market in any way, frankly, is an abdication of the state's workforce development goals. It's an abdication of the state's push towards clean energy, and ultimately, I think it's a disservice to people who will be using this technology. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Jedi Castro, and I'm an electrician. I've worked in the state of California with generation and storage, often over the last 15 years. And I'm standing up today to add my voice to those encouraging this board to limit C46 installation of energy storage and photovoltaic solar. As an electrician, the safety of the public must be my primary concern. I'm against the expansion of the C46 license primarily due to this concern. If the board decides to move forward with any expansion that allows C46 to do this work, instead of requiring the more rigorously trained C10 electrical contractors, then I support setting a very clear limit on those systems. 80 kilowatt hour, while in my mind very high, is at least a standard based on code. Finally, I'll agree with Board Member Simpson. We have heard this all before, and it is time to act. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Carla Palmer. I work for an electrical contractor. I'm here today to talk about the C46 contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I do support the 80 kilowatt threshold as consistent with the existing contractor classification regulatory framework, allowing incidental and supplemental work. At a certain size threshold, though, a battery energy storage system is so large that it cannot reasonably be considered incidental and supplemental to a solar PV system installation. So at some point, the size limit, it must be considered its own separate system. Personally, I think that limit should be 1 to 5 kilowatt hours, but at least the staff here is proposing a threshold that's based on existing code standards, and I support moving forward with regulations in this area. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is William Minyard, and I work with a contractor. I'm also here to talk about C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar system. I personally disagree that there is any compelling justification to expand the scope of a C46 contractor license regulation for further overlap with the scope of a C10 electrical contractor's license. However, if the CSLB were to amend the C46 license to expressly allow some installation of battery energy storage systems when paired with PVC solar, a limit based on the size of the battery energy storage system would make more sense from a technical, safety, and economic and regulatory perspective. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Gretchen Newsom on behalf of IBW 569 in San Diego. And I share with you that I too am an appointed member to a California board. And like you, I take very seriously the impacts that policy and regulation reform have on all Californians. I believe that all of our considerations and decisions should weigh how it affects the quality of life with particular focus on high road standards for jobs and careers. The notion of putting in good work and earning for our families and communities affects all components in life, as is evidenced with the top concerns of voters being now crime, climate, and homelessness. When people have good jobs, they have good lives. So how does that affect your deliberations today? You have before you a decision that will impact the work outlook for thousands of electricians, as well as the safety and quality of life for the public. Will you take the high road and ensure that electrical work, including energy storage, construction, and installation, is performed by C10 contractors that employ a skilled and trained workforce of certified electricians? These are individual workers, not contractors, but workers that have achieved critical certifications and knowledge that protects the public from hazardous situations. Or will you open a chasm further to low-road jobs and abandon public safety by allowing C46 contractors, not workers, contractors, to perform electrical work using lower-paid, untrained, non-electricians, thus putting downward wage pressure on certified electricians? I ask for you to take these deliberations very seriously today. They will be impacting all future generations. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Ben Davis. I'm an associate with the California Solar and Storage Association. I was one of the primary authors for the sections of the fire code and the sections of the residential code that set the KWH limits. And I will stand by the comments from our council that 600 kilowatt hours is the appropriate threshold if you're going to set one, and 80 kilowatt hours would be detrimental to the market. I've been hearing comments about allowing C46s to install energy storage systems would abandon public safety and that these workers are untrained, and that could not be farther from the truth. But I just wanted to bring up one point that hasn't been said, which is that the knowledge and the skills and the code regulations needed to install an energy storage system that is less than 80 kilowatt hours is the same as the knowledge and the skills and the code regulations to install a system larger than 80 kilowatt hours. And that is why it is arbitrary. If you are looking for a number in the code for where the regulations change, that number is 600 kilowatt hours, because at that point in time, you must conduct a hazard mitigation analysis and take action accordingly during the installation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name is Mark Buck. I'm a certified electrician in the state of California. I'm here to talk about the energy storage for the C46 contractors paired with the PV solar. I believe you guys are probably going to try to move forward with this, and 80 kilowatt hours, we keep hearing that. I think that's too high. 40 would be better. But if the board wants to move this forward, I would support an 80 kilowatt hour at this time. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good afternoon. My name's Kyle Church. I'm an electrician. Been doing this for about 20 years now. I also work for a C10 contractor. My comments are about this same thing we're all talking about, C46 contractors. It seems that this is kind of a small group of about roughly 300 contractors who are looking for special treatment so that they can install battery energy storage systems without the proper contractor licenses and without the use of certified electricians. To put this in context, there's over 25,000 contractors that currently are fully licensed to install both solar and battery storage projects. And those 25 contractors are the contractors that install 94% of the solar and energy storage systems in this state. It doesn't make any sense for me, as a state certified electrician, to expand the scope of C46 contractor license at the expense of the 25,000 contractors and employees who hold the correct licenses. But if you're going to do this, then I would suggest sticking with the 80 kilowatt deal and kind of keeping it more to a residential type system, all right? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Jesse Padilla. I am an electrician. My comments today are about the C46 only contractors installing energy storage when paired with PV solar. I oppose expanding the C46 license at all, but if that is the direction of the board intends to take, then I support setting a clear limit on the size of these systems. I think 80 kilowatt hours is too high, but at least it's based on actual building code standards. I support having the staff move this to regulations so that we can finally put this to bed. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you. Next comment, please.
Good afternoon. My name is Janine Cotter. I'm a C46 qualifier, co-founder, president of a majority woman-owned solar and battery energy storage specialty contractor based in San Francisco. We've been in business since 2004. My husband did his first grid-tied battery backup system in 1981. Solar contractors have been doing this work for a long time. DIR electrician certification has told my workers that they are not qualified to sit for the exam because hours worked for solar and battery energy storage is solar work and can't be used to qualify a candidate to sit for the certified electrician exam. So my colleagues who do this work every day for years are not being allowed to sit for the exam. So the decision that you make today regarding a limit will bar them from being able to do that work. And this is years of training and experience. You'll see that I provided 3 handouts. One of those is the Office of the State Fire Marshal. So Board Member Love, you can take a look at that. It says that the maximum energy rating permitted by this section is 280 kilowatt hours. And that means that for a home, the most you can put is 280 kilowatt hours on a home. That's 40 in a closet, utility closet, 80 in another location, 80 in another location, and 80 in another location. That makes 280 if you add that up. This right here is a spec sheet for the solar power wall. It's a 13.5 kilowatt hour capacity unit. You'll see in the fire marshal's guide that each individual ESS unit has to have a maximum energy rating of under 20 kilowatt hours. Everything that we do every day with a trained workforce has been safe.
Sorry. Thank you. Your 2 minutes are up. Thank you.
Good morning, Board. My name is Bernie Kotlier. I'm with the California Labor Management Cooperation Committee. After months of expert research, UC Berkeley recommended that C46 contractors not do this energy storage work when paired with PV for many good reasons. We don't have time to account for all of them today. But one of the gentlemen who spoke earlier talked about code and exams as if these C46 contractors were well prepared and examined. This is misleading and very confusing because what they're talking about is the contractor's license, not the worker's training or the worker's certification. A previous commenter said their people were certified. They are not. They are not certified. They are not trained. There's nothing in the state that requires a C46 worker to be trained, to be tested, or to be certified. There's no way for a consumer or anybody hiring them to know how much training they have or whether they're capable of doing this work. They could be taking them off the lot at Home Depot. No one would know. There's no way to tell. So it's important that we understand what we're really talking about. And we also heard that there's not enough people to do this work. This is complete and total nonsense. There are roughly 26,000 C10 contractors already. There's only 346, as you know, who have
only a C46 license. And you've also heard that they do between 3 and 6% of all the work based on an extensive study of CPUC and other state projects. We need to fix this. We need to have qualified people doing this work. Please don't be misled. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tom Enslow on behalf of the on behalf of the IBEW NECA Labor Management and Cooperation Committee. Couple points. One, no one is taking work away from C46 contractors. They can continue to install PV under this proposal. They'll continue to be able to install the vast majority, really, of the combined PV energy storage systems in the state. And 99% of all residential and small commercial paired systems are well below the kilowatt-hour threshold that's being proposed. I'd like to address Board Member Love's question about why the 80 kilowatt-hour standard. Where does that come from? And this comes from code, but it comes from, and the record reflects this, that the kilowatt-hour capacity of a battery energy storage system directly correlates with its safety fire risk. The more capacity, the more energy it stores, the greater that risk. And the codes reflect this by increasing the installation and safety standards based on size. And we'll see this really starting at 1 kilowatt hour for residential systems once they have to do some initial location requirements, fire detection requirements, impact protection requirements. And then at for lithium-ion batteries at 20 kilowatt hour for a single system, there's a whole bunch of requirements that are needed. And then for the aggregate, if you have aggregate system in a place 40 kilowatt hours inside or 80 kilowatt hour outside, then you need to increase stuff for combustible storage distance requirements, clearance requirements, listing requirements, commissioning, decommission operation requirements, fire detection requirements, fire suppression requirements, maximum enclosure size. I mean, there's a whole long list.
Wrap up your comments, please.
Things.
Thank you.
2 minutes. So I just wanted to let you know, this is where it's coming from.
Good afternoon, Chairman Wayne, board members, Eddie Bernacchi on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association. Always want to start and thank the board and staff for all the time they've put into this effort. I know it's been a long time. I am going to scrap what I plan to speak about today because I think we need to get back to why we are here. The authorization for C46 contractors to do battery energy storage was simple jurisdiction creep that this board allowed. The board allowed for questions by industry experts from the solar industry to be placed on their examination that related to battery energy storage years ago, 7-8 years ago. And as that started to trickle out into the industry, inspectors started to have concerns with those contractors doing the installations. We came to the board, asked for clarification. We thought there was going to be an easy path. We even received a letter from the prior registrar saying that they couldn't do this work. And after 6 years, we are still here debating. And when we start talking about, coming to some sort of compromise, that was something that our industry believed we were going to do in earnest with the board at their request, 6 months ago. We believe that this is separate electrical work. We always have. The codes treat it as separate electrical work. It should be covered by the C10. But in the spirit of compromise, we worked with the board staff to allow for some sort of limit to be placed on the incidental and supplemental section for the C46 contractors so they could continue to do the preponderance of battery energy storage in the residential market and small commercial. We're not happy with the 80 kilowatt hour threshold. We think it should be 0. But we think we have to set something here. This jurisdiction creep could happen with any license classification. There's new and emerging technologies that one of the board members mentioned. We need to get ahead of this, maybe in all classifications. But if we sit in our hands and do nothing, this is going to be really difficult. So we urge the board to move forward with regulations today, and we support the staff recommendation.
2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
How you doing? My name is Billy Hall. I'm representing Luminant in the solar industry. I've been doing solar for 8.5 years. I've installed batteries for that long. I've done it with safety as top priority, and I'll continue to do that as we continue. Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Christopher Smith. I'm a C10 contractor, and I haven't always been a C10 contractor. I came into this industry about 10 years ago with the idea to work in green energy, microgrids, energy storage, EV charging stations, off-grid homes, net zero energy buildings, the whole works. I began doing just financing, engineering, project management, consulting, and because demand was so tremendous in this region of California, I decided that I was going to get into the installation side as well. So I needed to get a license so I could physically do this. Now, I looked at getting my C46 license because that would allow me to do most of the work that I would need to do that I had already been doing in the past without sans installation, if you will. But I decided that I should just get my C10 because if I get my C10, I can do not only all of that work, but everything outside of it as well, meaning maybe I could do the HVAC system as well as the EV, just the standalone EV infrastructure as well. So I realize this has become a really hot button contentious issue, but if you are to have a C46 license, you can just go ahead and get a C10 just like I did. It's not that difficult, and you should be getting these kind of studying and these kinds of accolades anyway if you want to be a true contractor who's getting all of the information that's necessary and making a real mark in the industry in terms of safety and knowledge and what have you. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other public comment? Any final comments from the board? I just want to remind the board we're not asking for action on this particular legislative agenda item. We will be on the next one. So any other final comments from the board? All right, seeing none, we're now moving to the last item on the agenda item H2B, which provides review, discussion, and possible action by the board to initiate the rulemaking process pursuant to the Administrative Procedure Act to amend California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 810, 832.10, and 832.46, relating to the scope of the C10 and C46 contractors' authority to perform work relating to battery energy storage systems. We're now on page 176 of your packet. This is the draft regulatory language that is consistent with the recommendation of the CSLB staff report in consultation with expert consultants that we discussed in the previous agenda item. As I stated prior to the last agenda item, any vote that the board takes today is not establishing new law or changing any license classification today. This agenda item is a request by the CSLB staff that the board authorize staff to take the first of a number of steps in a public participation process that is required by the Administrative Procedure Act. It is necessary to start this process if CSLB is going to add battery energy storage systems to its contractor license regulations. In a moment, I will read the staff recommendation, and then I will ask for a motion. The staff recommendation is as follows. Approve the proposed regulatory text for the California Code of Regulations, Title 16, Sections 810, 832.10, and 832.46. Authorize the registrar to take all steps necessary to initiate the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and/or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process, and, if approved by the Department of Consumer Affairs and the Business, Consumer Services, and Housing Agency, set the matter for a hearing if preferred or requested. If the CSLB and/or registrar does not receive any adverse comments during the 45-day comment period, authorize the registrar to adopt the proposed regulations at California Code of Regulations. Title 16, Section 810, 832.10, and 832.46, as filed with the Office of Administrative Law for public notice, and take all steps necessary to complete the rulemaking process, making any non-substantive changes to the text and or rulemaking package as needed throughout the process. I would ask for a motion at this time.
I'd like to make that motion to accept
Johnny
the staff.
Simpson made the motion. Do I have a second?
Second, Michael Mark.
Michael Mark. Okay. As we discussed earlier, we are limiting public comment to 2 minutes. At this time, I will now invite the public to comment. Please form a line at the side of the room, and thank you. And I just, proper or not, I want to make sure we don't want to duplicate what's been said. We've had almost 30 speakers before. Those are all in the record. So if it's the same type of comment, we already have it. I just want you to know that. So I thank you. Anything from the public?
Thank you again, Heather Minner, legal counsel for CALSA. So I'd like to say that this is the first time the public and the board has been seeing this draft regulatory language, and it is really appropriate here to refer this to the legislative committee. Out of nothing else, it would be a courtesy to extend to your vice chair, who has been very involved in this issue and is not here today. And it makes sense to do this because you don't want to go embark on the whole time-consuming and expensive process of beginning the rulemaking procedure without having the draft legislation go through your legislative committee and allow people to have a little more than 2 minutes to comment on it, which is what the legislative committee is there for. So I think this should be referred to the legislative committee before you act on it. I've talked about how this is harmful. There's no justification. You're cutting off a lot of business. Regardless, any draft language, wherever you set the limit, should allow solar contractors to repair the batteries they've already installed. This will allow them to fulfill their warranty obligations and be helpful for the consumers who contracted for that work. You should have a grandfather clause added. Also, the language should be amended to allow solar contractors to install batteries within the threshold to an existing solar system. It makes no sense for the board to say solar contractors are authorized to install solar energy systems that have batteries at the same time of a certain size, but the solar contractor somehow isn't authorized or isn't qualified to install the battery in a separate contract later on to an existing solar system. And this is incredibly important for public policy because we need more storage in the grid. The governor has declared a state of emergency because there's not enough storage in our electrical system right now. That is a state of emergency. And we need as many qualified people as we can to bring these systems on board. And you need to allow that to happen. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, Janine Cotter again. I just wanted to talk a minute about workforce. Included in the 3 materials that I handed out is an op-ed that was done by Melissa Brewster, who runs our construction production, Pamela Kwan, who actually several years ago sat for the certified electrician exam and passed it. So she's our one employee that's certified as an electrician. And so in that op-ed, it pretty much tells you that the life path and the life story and the lived experience of these women that are now doing this work. So I just thought it'd be helpful to note that I'm the vice chair of the Workforce Investment Board in San Francisco, a 2015 awarded California Woman of the Year for my assembly district for Luminalt's commitment to workforce development and diversification. Our skilled workforce reflects the breadth and depth of California's beautiful diversity. In 2021, Luminalt pulled over 50% of the solar-paired battery energy storage permits in San Francisco. No other contractor comes close. That was done with individuals like Billy Hall, who has 8.5 years experience solely day in, day out doing solar-paired battery energy storage systems. To suggest that he does not have the qualifications to do the work that he does every day is an affront. And he did apply to sit for the exam and was told that his hours doing the work that the electrical contractors here have said is their work is not qualified, does not qualify him to sit for the exam. Now, if you disadvantage workers from being able to progress and do not allow them the pathway to be able to do this exam,
Please wrap it
you cut out people from being able to do their work and their career and their livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hey, it's Brandon again. I wanted to provide some clarification on your comment regarding 80 kWh if it's too small for future electrification. Electrification's coming down the pipeline. We discussed it in the 2017 code, the 2020 NEC, 2023, and it's getting past us. We can't keep up. Housing is going that way, right? As the removal of gas comes into play, people are going to start needing larger and larger size solar electrical systems, but almost all solar electrical systems in the next decade are going to include energy storage. People like that comfort of having energy storage in case of a blackout and emergency, especially with fires in California. My personal energy storage system at my house is around 100 kWh. And that's because I have several structures, and I have a well, and I have a lot of farmers in the neighborhood that need to operate their gates for fire, for first responders and stuff like that. I'm an exception, I understand that. But an electric vehicle being parked in the garage is much larger than 80 kWh. I just want the codes and the ideas that come out of this room to align, right? It's got to be based on technicals. It's got to be under an understanding more than just an assumption, a report put together, and then opinions. Leave the politics out of it. Let's look at what the codes actually say. Let's talk to fire, why they made the recommendations with UL, with SEAC, with all these codes and standards organizations, NEC, California Electrical. You know, there's so many people that work in codes and standards, and I feel like they're absent from this room, and this is why I came up, is because we talk about this for years and come up with numbers, and everyone comes to a conclusion. We roll it out in standards, and then we hear some other group is like, hey, let's change it and go this way. Well, where'd that number come from? I don't know. We kind of put it together what was an original draft of a first draft, and we kind of went over. So I just want you guys to consider that electrification is coming.
Thank you.
And don't set those low thresholds. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Eddie Bernacchi again on behalf of the National Electrical Contractors Association. Just wanted a couple comments on moving this towards the regulatory process. I think it's important to note that through the regulatory process, changes can be made to whatever proposals are being floated and move forward. Another little brief history lesson, this board did solicit and contract with an independent counsel to provide a recommendation, which was the University of California, Berkeley. They recommended that this work should only be done by C10 contractors. The legislative committee asked that the industry get together and come forward with some sort of compromise for the regulatory process. I believe we worked in earnest to get there. We started out a 20 kilowatt hour provision that would cover all residential, which is kind of the average throughout the state. So we weren't shutting out those markets. We are supportive of the recommendation at 80 kilowatt hours. But the board did vote to support that zero tolerance for C46 is doing this work in July of last year. And because of some legal hookups and others, we came back to the table and tried to figure this out. And so we strongly encourage you to move this towards regulation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Tom Enslow on behalf of the IBEW NECA Labor Management Cooperation Committee. 2 quick points. One, no one's is proposing to limit, future-sized EV or limit new EV technology. What this is about jurisdiction creep, which really all specialty contractors should be concerned about. We're talking about right now, 97% of all energy storage, PVs paired projects are being done by C10 contractors. They are installing this work. They will continue to install this work, and they are by far the vast majority of people who install this. Quick point on the regulatory process. All that's being asked of you today is to send this through the normal regulatory process. That then requires a 45-day public comment period in which board members can submit comments as well during that, as well as communicate with their staff. And then if there's any changes, it could be another 45-day comment period or a 15-day comment period, depending on how much that change is. And then it comes back to the board, and you can approve it, disapprove it, or recommend changes that then have to go back again for public comment. So that you're not making a decision on this proposal that this is going to get passed today. What you're saying is we've been doing this for 5 years. Let's start this regulatory process, and let's end this. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Thank everyone. Any other public comment? All right. Board members, any final comments from the board?
Thank you,
Board
Mr.
Member
Chair. This is a very complex thing that we've been trying to do for a long time, long before I came on this board. And before I make my vote, I want to make sure that I understand what I'm reading, what I'm hearing, And because I don't want to come back and regret what I've done, because it's important for both sides. Everybody has families. We do talk about our future generations. So I have a couple of questions. I don't know if they can be answered, but I need some clarification on a couple of things. It sounds like what we're getting ready, what staff has proposed, this recommendation to start the regulatory process. However, it sounds to me like changes can be made in that process during the 45-day period. My concern is the word, if you can clarify for me and give me a definition of what does it mean when it talks about making any non-substantive changes. What does that non-substantive mean? Does that mean you can't change the 80 kilowatt number? What does that mean?
I think the changes to any language, that if there's a vote on the language today as proposed in the packet, changes can be made to it that are non-substantive or substantive, and will go out for notice. It can be either one. Non-substantive is if we're not changing the core of what's being proposed. If it's a grammatical change or a typo or something like that, would be non-substantive. And then a substantive change would be changing something like the kilowatt hour amount.
Okay.
And either way, that can be done through the regulatory process.
Okay. And then my last question is, I heard a little bit about the legislative committee. Do we work with them at all, or is that a separate and to this?
So the original motion in March, we talked. The motion authorized staff to bring this back to a legislative committee, or if it was necessary, or bring it back to the board. And what occurred was the latter. So we did not bring it to the legislative committee, but the regulatory process can begin without involvement of the legislative committee. But we can. If there's changes through the regulatory process to the language, we would bring it back to the board and alert the board of those changes and seek approval of the board to change the proposal at that time.
Would we have to make a motion to go back to the legislative committee
Yes.
after the 45 days and all of that? So it can be done?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other board comments, questions?
Through the chair,
Yes.
Michael Mark here. I also have sat on a lot of these meetings where there's a lot of back and forth. In my original vote, I do also think that the 80 kilowatt hours is a little high, but going back and forth, they've came to some sort of consensus. At least there's a recommendation where, and that was my question earlier about what's the average right now. If the average is 20 and 30, the C36 industry is not getting cut out of this at all. There's still going to be work within that scope for BES systems. It's when it's larger systems, that's what it seems like to me. So in my opinion, I think that's why I second the motion. Was we've had a lot of discussion, conversations back and forth. It's about time that at least us as a board make a decision on this. Thank you.
Good. Anyone else from the board?
I'll make a comment.
Susan?
I wasn't sure I was going to, but I've been on the board longer than anyone. I may not be the oldest, but I'm feeling it today. However, we have, over the last 6 years, listened to the impassioned speeches from both sides, and it was very important to hear all of that. And I think 6 years ago, the technology was even different. The kilowatt per hour was very different. So our ability to stay on top of and in a fair way to establish what the regulations should be with consumer protection in mind, that we haven't been able to do this because technology is changing rapidly. People are very impassioned about their work. And so very few board members here are qualified to evaluate the kilowatt hours, the fire codes, the comparisons. And in a way, it was time, and when this was proposed to put it into regulatory rulemaking, it was a great relief for me because we have listened to this for quite a long time. It's a very important decision to make. But to have it taken on, making the staff working with regulatory rulemaking is very important at this time because they can do it the appropriate way that is recommended for many other industries, as I learned. And that also, today we are not changing any rules or classifications or laws, but that we are recommending and I use the word baseline, and it's probably not appropriate in that language, but we are recommending a baseline, but that baseline will be reviewed by both sides in a government, in a regulatory rulemaking, very formal fashion, because it's very hard for us to determine what is right, what the cap is at this time. It is a very technical issue that impacts industries and consumers, and my vote would be to support the staff recommendation and move it into regulatory rulemaking. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other board member comments? We have a motion and a second. Mariah, will you call the roll, please?
Susan Granzella. Aye. Frank Altamura.
No.
Rodney Cobos, approved absence. David De La Torre, approved absence. Miguel Galarza.
Nay.
Alan Guy.
Aye.
Diana Love. Aye. Michael Mark.
Aye.
Steve Pinelli.
Aye.
Jim Ruane.
Aye.
Johnny Simpson.
Aye.
Mary Teichert, approved absence. Motion passes.
Thank you for your excellent guidance in that, Mr. Ruane. My agenda says, Susan, you may want to make a comment here regarding your tenure as board chair. Today is my last day, my last meeting, and it's been a pleasure to serve with everyone on the board, and also the importance of working closely with staff. It's been quite a journey, but looking forward to being a regular member and working with Mary and Diana and Mark and Michael in the future. So thank you very much. And this concludes our board business for today. Can I please get a motion to adjourn the board meeting?
Motion to adjourn. Second.
Thank you. This meeting is adjourned. Thank you.
You didn't want us to make any comments about you. I wanted to
I
say
didn't
something.
want to.
Oh,
No,
okay.
especially because I opened my, I had to say that.